Daniel Brooks stood frozen at gate 47, boarding pass trembling in his hand, as a voice he'd tried to forget cut through the terminal noise like a blade. "Daniel, wait!" Victoria Hale, billionaire CEO, untouchable force of nature, was running toward him through SeaTac Airport, her usual composure shattered, her eyes raw with something he'd never seen before. Fear. Behind him, the gate agent announced final boarding. Ahead of him, his daughter waited 3,000 miles away. And right here, breathless and vulnerable, stood a woman who'd spent 3 days dismantling every wall he'd built around his heart. What happened next would either destroy the fragile safety he'd created for his child, or prove that second chances aren't just for people who've earned them. If you want to see how a single moment at an airport gate rewrites 2 broken lives, stay with me until the end of this story. And please, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. If this one moves you, hit that like button. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. The exhibition hall buzzed with that particular breed of chaos that only tech conferences could generate. A cacophony of elevator pitches, forced networking laughter, and the relentless ping of phones announcing deals, connections, failures. Daniel Brooks stood in the corner of booth 347, watching his carefully constructed display tilt at an increasingly dangerous angle, and thought about how perfectly the moment captured his entire life. The banner, LearnBridge, Education Technology for Every Mind, hung crooked, one corner detached and flapping with each blast from the convention center's aggressive air conditioning. The tablet meant to showcase his app had frozen on the loading screen 20 minutes ago. And the folding table he'd borrowed from his neighbor's garage had developed a wobble that made every business card he'd arranged look like it was trying to escape. Daniel pressed his palm against the table edge, steadying it, and checked his phone. 47 minutes until his pitch slot. 3 hours until his flight home. And exactly 0 interested investors so far. "Daddy, did you show them the colors yet?" Lena's voice filtered through his earbuds. He'd called her during his break, needing to hear something real in this sea of performance and posturing. She was 9 years old, brilliant in ways that defied traditional measurement, and the entire reason LearnBridge existed. "Not yet, sweetheart," Daniel said, turning slightly away from the booth traffic. "But I will. I'm going to tell them exactly what you told me, that learning isn't broken. Schools just haven't figured out that different brains need different bridges." "You sound nervous." Lena had always been too perceptive. "Are you doing the thing where you hold your breath?" Daniel exhaled deliberately. "Not anymore." "Good. Because your app is amazing, and if they don't see that, they're the ones who don't understand bridges." She paused. "Aunt Marie says I need to finish my homework now. Love you to the moon." "And back again, baby? I'll call you tonight." The connection ended, leaving Daniel in the familiar position of being simultaneously inspired and heartbroken by his daughter's faith in him. Lena saw possibilities where the world saw deficits, in herself, in others, in her father's chances of turning a bootstrap education app into something sustainable. He'd been building LearnBridge for 18 months, ever since Lena's 3rd-grade teacher had suggested, with that particular blend of concern and condescension, that perhaps Lena would be more comfortable in a specialized environment. Translation: "Your daughter's autism makes her too complicated for our classroom." Daniel had smiled politely, thanked her for her time, and spent that entire night researching adaptive learning technologies. By morning, he'd sketched the first prototype of an app that could recognize learning patterns, adjust delivery methods in real time, and celebrate neural diversity instead of pathologizing it. The fact that he'd been a project manager at a mid-sized marketing firm, not a developer, not an educator, not an entrepreneur, hadn't stopped him. He'd taught himself to code through YouTube tutorials and library books. He'd interviewed dozens of parents, teachers, and neurodivergent adults. He'd cashed out his modest 401k, moved from their 2-bedroom apartment to a cheaper 1-bedroom where Lena got the room, and he took the couch. And now, after 18 months of sacrifice and belief, he was here at TechRise West, standing in a crooked booth with a frozen tablet, hoping someone with actual money would see what Lena already knew, that his app could change lives. "Excuse me, is this supposed to be doing this?" Daniel turned to find a conference volunteer, college-aged, wearing a staff t-shirt, pointing at his banner. The detached corner had finally given up entirely, and now the whole thing sagged at a 45-degree angle, making LearnBridge read more like LearnBrid. No, Daniel admitted. That's definitely not supposed to be doing that. I can grab some extra clips from the supply closet if you want. That would be incredible. Thank you. The volunteer jogged off, leaving Daniel to conduct emergency triage on his display. He was reaching up to support the banner when he heard the sound of expensive heels clicking to a stop behind him. Interesting approach, a woman's voice said, cultured, amused, carrying the kind of confidence that came from never having to prove yourself to anyone. The intentional chaos aesthetic makes everything else here look too polished, too detached from actual problems. Daniel turned, still holding the corner of his banner, and found himself looking at a woman who seemed to command the space around her through sheer presence alone. She was perhaps early 40s, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daniel's entire conference budget, with dark hair pulled back in a style that suggested both efficiency and elegance. But it was her eyes that struck him, sharp, assessing, yet somehow genuinely curious rather than dismissive. I wish I could claim it was intentional, Daniel said, attempting a smile that probably looked as tired as he felt. But this is just regular chaos. The booth structure failed me about 2 hours ago. The structure or your budget? She asked it without cruelty, as a simple observation. Both, if we're being honest. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with an attention that felt different from the cursory glances he'd been getting all day. What's your pitch? Daniel blinked. Now? I have a slot at 3:30. I'm asking now. She gestured at the banner. LearnBridge, education technology, sell me. Something in her directness bypassed Daniel's carefully rehearsed presentation and went straight to the truth. My daughter is autistic, brilliant, creative, sees patterns and connections that most people miss entirely, and her school wanted to shuffle her off to a special program because she learns differently, not worse, differently. So I built an app that actually adapts to how individual brains work, instead of forcing every kid through the same narrow pipeline and calling the ones who struggle deficient. The woman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. A recognition, maybe, or a memory. Show me. The tablet's frozen, Daniel admitted, jiggling the power button uselessly. Then tell me. How does it work? So Daniel told her. Not the polished elevator pitch he'd rehearsed, but the real version. The story of watching Lena shut down in traditional classroom settings, then light up when information was presented through pattern recognition games. The research showing that neurodivergent students often struggled not because of cognitive deficits, but because of delivery mismatch. The AI-driven assessment system that identified individual learning pathways without labeling or limiting students. The early beta testing showing dramatic engagement increases across diverse learner populations. He talked for maybe 5 minutes, aware that he was probably losing her with details, but unable to stop because this was the thing he'd built from love and desperation and stubborn belief that his daughter deserved better. When he finally ran out of words, the woman was quiet for a moment. What's your funding situation? She asked. Bootstrapped. Everything I had went into development. I'm here on a conference scholarship and a prayer. Investors interested? Daniel laughed, a short, tired sound. You're the first person who's asked me anything beyond whether I have promotional swag. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at him. I'm hosting a small dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Invitation only, about 20 people, all in venture or strategic investment. You should come. Daniel stared at her. Who are you? Something like amusement crossed her face. Victoria Hale, Hale Industries. The name hit Daniel like a wave. Hale Industries, a tech conglomerate worth billions with divisions spanning cloud infrastructure, enterprise software, and emerging education technology. Victoria Hale herself was legendary in the industry, youngest woman to take a company public before 30, known for aggressive innovation and zero tolerance for inefficiency. And she was standing in front of his collapsing booth, inviting him to dinner. I have a flight at 6, Daniel managed. Change it. I need to get home to my daughter. When's your return flight? Tomorrow morning, early? Victoria considered this. The dinner starts at 7. Casual presentations, direct conversation with people who actually write checks. You'd be back to your hotel by 10, make your morning flight easily. She paused, and her voice softened almost imperceptibly. I'm not promising anything, but I am promising that the people at that dinner will actually listen to what you're building. That's more than you're getting here. She was right. Daniel had paid $2,000 he couldn't afford for this conference, and so far all he'd gotten was a broken booth and pity from volunteers. Why? He asked. Why would you do this? Victoria's expression flickered with something, not quite vulnerability, but something less armored than her usual presentation. Because 17 years ago, someone told me my approach to learning was unconventional and suggested I'd be more comfortable in a less demanding program. And because that moment still makes me angry enough to want to dismantle every system that confuses different with deficient. She met his eyes directly. Your daughter deserves people who see her brilliance, not her difference. And your app, if it's half as good as you describe, deserves funding that understands its real value. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, not hope exactly, but something more dangerous, possibility. Okay, he said, I'll be there. Victoria nodded, already typing on her phone again. I'm sending you the details. Restaurant's called Meridian, private room. Don't bother with slides. These people respond to story and substance, not performance. She glanced up at his collapsing banner. And Daniel, fix your booth. Someone else might wander by before 3:30. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the conference crowd with the same commanding presence that had announced her arrival. Daniel stood there, still holding his banner, trying to process what had just happened. The volunteer returned with clips, chattering about supply closet organization, and Daniel mechanically secured his display, his mind spinning through a dozen calculations. Changing his flight would cost money he'd budgeted for groceries. Staying for dinner meant calling Marie, his sister-in-law, asking her to keep Lena overnight again. It meant extending his time away from the person who mattered most, gambling on a possibility that might evaporate the moment Victoria Hale actually saw LearnBridge's current limitations. But it also meant a room full of investors who actually write checks, introduced by someone whose name opened doors Daniel didn't even know existed. He pulled out his phone and called Marie. That was quick, she answered. Conference over already? Not exactly. Marie, I need a favor. A big one. The dinner was everything Victoria had promised, and nothing Daniel had expected. Meridian occupied the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the Seattle waterfront, the kind of restaurant where the host recognized guests by sight and the menu didn't list prices. The private room Victoria had reserved somehow managed to feel both intimate and impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the sunset over Puget Sound, a single long table set for 22, and an atmosphere of relaxed exclusivity that suggested everyone present had earned their seat. Daniel had changed in the convention center bathroom, his one decent button-down and the blazer he'd bought specifically for this trip, and still felt underdressed among the casual luxury surrounding him. These were people who wore $1,000 jeans and limited edition sneakers, whose casual dinner was someone else's board meeting. Victoria appeared at his elbow as he hesitated in the doorway, looking far more relaxed than she had at the conference. She'd traded her suit for dark jeans and a silk blouse, her hair down now, and something about the transformation made her seem simultaneously more approachable and more formidable. You made it, she said. How was the rest of the conference? Anticlimactic, Daniel admitted. After this morning, everything else felt like going through motions. Did your pitch slot happen? Yeah, 3 people showed up, 2 left halfway through, and the third wanted to know if I'd considered pivoting to corporate training. Victoria's expression tightened. Let me guess. They suggested education technology was too fragmented, too dependent on policy changes, not scalable enough for serious investment. Word for word, actually. They said the same thing to me 12 years ago when I pitched adaptive assessment tools, then sold the division for $300 million once we proved the model worked. She gestured toward the room. Come on, let me introduce you to people who think bigger. The next 2 hours unfolded like a masterclass in how networks actually functioned at the highest levels. Victoria didn't announce Daniel's presence or formally introduce his app. Instead, she wove him into conversations organically, mentioning his work when it naturally aligned with whatever topic was flowing. A discussion about AI ethics became an opening to talk about LearnBridge's commitment to privacy and consent in youth platforms. A debate about education reform created space for Daniel to explain how adaptive technology could support rather than replace human teachers. A casual question about personal motivations led to him sharing Lena's story, not as a pitch, but as the truth of why this work mattered. And people listened, really listened, asked follow-up questions, challenged assumptions not to dismiss him but to understand his thinking. Several exchanged contact information, promising to review materials if he sent them. But more than the professional connections, Daniel found himself surprised by the conversation's substance. These weren't the transactional networking exchanges he'd endured at the conference. People talked about their families, their doubts, the projects they'd abandoned, and the ones they wished they'd pursued. Someone mentioned a niece with dyslexia who'd stopped reading entirely until a teacher introduced audiobooks. Another described the guilt of working 80-hour weeks while their kids grew up with nannies. Victoria, Daniel noticed, mostly listened. She guided conversations, made connections between people, ensured everyone felt heard, but rarely centered herself. Only once, when someone asked about Hale Industries' new education division, did she speak at length about her own work. "We're focused on access," she said, "not just to technology, but to pathways that traditional systems block or ignore." The smartest person in any given field might be sitting in a failing school right now, written off because they don't test well, or because their learning style doesn't match some arbitrary standard. Her eyes found Daniel's across the table. "I spent too many years believing those standards define my worth. I'm investing in futures where they don't." The dinner eventually wound down, people drifting toward the exit in small clusters, promising follow-ups and future meetings. Daniel found himself standing by those floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Seattle's lights reflecting off the dark water, trying to process the evening. "You did well," Victoria said, joining him at the window. "Natural storyteller. People respond to authenticity. You can't fake caring the way you care about your work." "I just told the truth," Daniel said. "Didn't seem worth lying to people who could probably smell bullshit from miles away." Victoria laughed, a real laugh, unguarded in a way her earlier professional warmth hadn't been. "Accurate assessment." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "Can I ask you something? And feel free to tell me if it's overstepping." "After tonight, ask anything." "Your daughter, Lena. You mention her with this complete certainty that she's brilliant, that the systems are wrong, not her. But I imagine people have questioned that, suggested you're in denial about limitations, that you're projecting your hopes onto someone who might need different expectations." Victoria's voice was careful, but Daniel heard the personal weight behind the question. "How did you get to that certainty? How did you learn to trust your understanding of her over everyone else's assessments?" Daniel considered the question, really considered it, because Victoria was asking something real. "I don't know if it's certainty," he said finally. "It's more like I decided whose definition of success I was going to believe. The school's version was about compliance, about fitting in, about measuring her against benchmarks designed for neurotypical development. And in that framework, Lena was struggling, falling behind, becoming a problem to manage." He turned to face Victoria directly. "But when I watched her at home, I saw someone who understood complex systems intuitively, who created elaborate imaginary worlds with internal consistency, who asked questions that made me rethink assumptions I didn't know I had. So I had a choice: believe the system that said she was deficient, or trust what I could see right in front of me." "That's terrifying," Victoria said quietly, "trusting yourself over institutional authority." "It is. Every day I wonder if I'm delusional, if I'm setting her up for disappointment by believing she can navigate a world that wasn't built for her." Daniel smiled slightly. "Then she says something that reveals she's been 3 steps ahead of me the whole time, and I remember that different doesn't mean less." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "My parents wanted me to be a lawyer. Ivy League, prestigious firm, respectable career. When I told them I was dropping out of Harvard Law to join a startup, they told me I was throwing away my potential, that I didn't understand how the real world worked." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They still introduced me as our daughter who could have been a lawyer, as if everything I built was just compensation for failing their expectations." Do you talk to them often? Holidays? Obligations? They're proud now, in their way, proud of the success they can quantify. But they've never understood that I didn't build Hale Industries to prove them wrong. I built it because their narrow definition of success felt like suffocation. She met Daniel's eyes. Your daughter is lucky. She has someone who sees her clearly. She made it easy, Daniel said. Being her dad is the least complicated part of my life. Everything else, finances, career, relationships, that's where I struggle. Relationships? Daniel hesitated, surprised by the personal turn. There was someone, Lena's mom. She left when Lena was 18 months old, before the diagnosis, but after it became clear that parenting was going to be more complicated than she'd signed up for. He'd told this story before, but usually kept it clinical, factual. Something about Victoria's openness made him offer more. She said I was too intense about it, that I was creating problems by refusing to accept that some kids are just harder, like I was personally responsible for making parenthood difficult by not admitting my daughter was defective. That's... Victoria stopped, clearly editing her first response. That must have been devastating. It was clarifying, made me realize that I needed people in my life who saw Lena the way I did, or at least who were willing to trust my understanding of her. Anyone who needed me to apologize for her existence wasn't someone we needed around. Daniel realized he was saying more than he'd intended, but Victoria's attention felt safe somehow. It's been 7 years. I've dated a little, but nothing serious. Hard to prioritize romance when you're building an app on a prayer and raising a kid who needs more presence than most. Lonely, though, Victoria said, not a question. Sometimes. But I've got Lena and my sister-in-law Marie and a few friends who show up when it matters. He smiled. And apparently I've now got a contact list of investors who might actually return my emails. You do, Victoria confirmed. Several of them pulled me aside before leaving. You'll get meeting requests. She paused, then added, For what it's worth, I'm planning to set up a call with my education division director. We've been looking for adaptive learning tools that could integrate with our platform. LearnBridge might be a good fit. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You don't have to do that. I know. I want to. There's a difference. Victoria's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with a slight frown. I should go. Early call tomorrow with our European offices. But Daniel, tonight wasn't charity. You belong in rooms like this. Your work deserves serious attention. Thank you, Daniel said, meaning it for more than just the dinner invitation. Victoria smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Get home to your daughter. Tell her the investors loved the bridge metaphor. She left with the same decisive grace she brought to everything, and Daniel stood alone at the window for a few more minutes, looking out at the city lights and trying to believe that this wasn't just a beautiful detour before returning to his usual struggle. His phone buzzed. A text from Marie. Lena's asleep. Says to tell you she knew they'd love it. How'd it go? Daniel typed back. Better than I expected. Flying home tomorrow. Thank you for keeping her. That's what family does. See you tomorrow. Daniel pocketed his phone and headed for the exit, already mentally planning his morning. Early flight, reunion with Lena, then the hard work of following up on tonight's connections before they cooled into polite rejection. He didn't let himself think about Victoria Hale beyond professional gratitude. She was a billionaire CEO who'd shown kindness to someone struggling in her industry. That was the story. Anything else was just projection, the dangerous territory of reading meaning into moments that were merely transactional. But walking back to his hotel through Seattle's quiet streets, Daniel couldn't quite shake the memory of her asking about loneliness, or the way she'd shared her parents' disappointment, like offering something precious. He filed it away as the kind of connection that happens sometimes between strangers. Real in the moment, irrelevant in the morning. He had no way of knowing how wrong he was. The next day unfolded in the peculiar way days do after significant events, ordinary on the surface, but carrying an undercurrent of change that Daniel couldn't quite name. His morning flight left at 6:30, which meant a 4:45 a.m. wake-up and airport arrival in that strange pre-dawn limbo where everything felt suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. Daniel moved through security and gate waiting on autopilot, his mind still processing the previous night. He'd received 3 emails before boarding, 2 from dinner attendees requesting follow-up calls, and 1 from Victoria's executive assistant scheduling a meeting with Hale Industries' Education Division Director for the following week. Professional, efficient, exactly what Victoria had promised. The flight home was uneventful, one of those cross-country journeys that compressed time and distance into 5 hours of recycled air and bad coffee. Daniel tried to work on his investor pitch deck, but found his attention drifting to the window, watching the country slide past below. He thought about Victoria's question about certainty, about choosing whose definition of success to believe. He'd answered honestly. He had chosen to trust what he saw in Lena over institutional assessment. But if he was equally honest with himself, that choice terrified him constantly. What if he was wrong? What if his love for his daughter had blinded him to real limitations that would hurt her more by being ignored? These weren't new doubts. They circled constantly, especially at 3 a.m. when Lena was asleep, and Daniel's mind was free to catalog all the ways he might be failing her. But then he'd remember moments like last week, when Lena had explained how prime numbers were like lonely numbers that only had themselves and one for friends, which made them special, not sad, or the elaborate system she'd created for organizing her books. Not by title or author, but by which stories would be friends with each other if they could meet. That was brilliance. Maybe not the kind measured by standardized tests, but real nonetheless. His phone buzzed as the plane descended. Marie, with a photo of Lena at the breakfast table, holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, Daddy," in elaborate multicolored letters. Daniel smiled, something tight in his chest loosening. This, coming home to his daughter, was the center of gravity that made everything else make sense. "Tell me everything," Lena demanded the moment Daniel walked through Marie's door. She launched herself at him with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of someone who hadn't learned yet to moderate her affection, and Daniel caught her, breathing in the familiar smell of her strawberry shampoo. "Everything might take a while," he said. "How about the important parts?" They sat on Marie's couch, Lena curled against his side, Marie bringing coffee without being asked, and Daniel told the story of the past 2 days. Not the professional version, but the real one. The booth falling apart, the moment Victoria Hale stopped to talk, the dinner where people actually listened. "So they liked your app," Lena said with complete confidence. "Some of them, yeah. We'll see if it turns into anything real." "It will. Because you built it right." Lena said this as simple fact, the way she might note that gravity pulls things down. Marie caught Daniel's eye over Lena's head, her expression amused. They'd had countless conversations about Lena's absolute certainty in her father's competence, about whether it was healthy or setting her up for disappointment. "Did you meet anyone nice?" Lena asked, with the elaborate casualness of someone who'd been coached on the question. Daniel looked at Marie, who shrugged with faux innocence. "Your aunt's been talking to you about my social life again, hasn't she? She said you work too hard and forget to have fun. Did you have fun at the dinner?" "I did, actually. Met a lot of interesting people." "Anyone special?" This from Marie, not even pretending subtlety. Daniel thought about Victoria, her sharp questions, her unexpected vulnerability, the way she'd shared her parents' disappointment, like offering a truth too personal for professional settings. "I met the CEO who invited me to the dinner," he said carefully. "Victoria Hale. She was impressive." "Impressive how?" Marie asked, eyebrows raised. "Professionally. She's brilliant, runs a billion-dollar company, understands the education technology space better than anyone I've met." "Uh-huh. And personally?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't know. We only talked for a little while. She seemed lonely, maybe? Successful, but isolated. Like she'd built this incredible career but wasn't sure what it had cost her." Lena looked up at him with those two perceptive eyes. "Did she make you smile?" "What kind of question is that?" "You're smiling now, talking about her. You do the small smile, not the polite smile. The real one." Marie laughed. "She's got you there." Daniel shook his head, pulling Lena closer. "You're both reading way too much into a professional dinner. Victoria Hale is completely out of my league. Different world, different life. She was being kind to someone struggling in her industry. That's all." "If you say so," Marie said, clearly unconvinced. They spent the rest of the day settling back into routine. Daniel unpacking, Lena showing him the elaborate cities she'd built with blocks during his absence. Marie extracting promises that he'd actually follow up on those investor emails rather than talking himself out of success. That night, after Marie had gone home and Lena was supposedly asleep, Daniel sat on their apartment's small balcony and opened his laptop. The 3 investor emails waited, along with the calendar invitation from Victoria's assistant. He started drafting responses, professional and enthusiastic, trying to sound confident without being presumptuous. He was halfway through the second email when his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "This is Victoria. Got your number from the conference registration. Hope that's not weird. Just wanted to say I enjoyed our conversation last night. Good luck with the follow-ups." VH, Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. It was friendly, professional, the kind of thing successful people probably did all the time. Maintaining connections, being gracious. But something about the slight awkwardness of "hope that's not weird" felt more human than CEO. He typed back, "Not weird. Thank you again for everything. The introduction, the dinner, the connection to your education team. I'm grateful." The response came quickly. "You earned it. Your work is good, Daniel. Trust that." Another pause, then, "And I enjoyed our conversation too. You asked real questions. That's rarer than you'd think." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Before he could formulate a response, another message arrived. "I'm in Boston this week for board meetings. Flying back Friday. If you're free for coffee this weekend, I'd love to hear how the investor calls go. No pressure. Just seemed like we might have more to talk about." Daniel's heart did something complicated in his chest. What was this? Professional mentorship extending to weekend coffee? Something else? He thought about Marie's teasing, about Lena's observation that Victoria made him smile differently. He thought about 7 years of being so focused on stability and parenthood that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to anticipate someone's company for reasons that had nothing to do with obligation. "I'm free Saturday afternoon," he typed before he could overthink it. "There's a cafe near my place. Lena will be with Marie, so I've got a few hours." "Perfect. Send me the address. See you Saturday." Daniel sat there on his small balcony, looking out at his modest neighborhood, and wondered what the hell he was doing entertaining the possibility that Victoria Hale's interest might be anything beyond professional courtesy. But he sent her the cafe address anyway. And when he finally went inside to sleep, he found himself looking forward to Saturday with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Inside, Lena was standing in her doorway, backlit by her nightlight, wearing the oversized t-shirt she slept in, and an expression that suggested she'd been awake the entire time. "You're texting someone," she observed. "The someone from the dinner." Daniel sighed, knowing there was no point in pretending. "How do you always know these things?" "You hold your phone different when it's someone you like. More careful, like it might break." She patted over to him, small and serious in the dim light. "Is she nice to you?" The question caught Daniel off guard with its careful specificity. Not, "Is she nice?" but "Is she nice to you?" The distinction of someone who'd watched her father minimize his own needs for years. "Yeah, Bug, she's nice to me." "Good." Lena leaned against his arm. "You should have nice people. You're always nice to everyone else." "When did you get so wise?" "I was born wise. You just notice late." She yawned, breaking the solemnity. "Can I meet her if she keeps texting you?" "It's just coffee, Lena. One meeting. Probably talking about work stuff." "Uh-huh." She kissed his cheek and headed back to bed. "Night, Daddy. Try to sleep instead of worrying about everything." Daniel watched her disappear into her room, then sat in the quiet apartment wondering when his 9-year-old had become more emotionally perceptive than he was. He did try to sleep, but his mind kept circling back to Victoria's message, to the casual suggestion of weekend coffee, to the way she'd phrased it as, "Seemed like we might have more to talk about." More than what? More than business required? More than professional courtesy demanded? Daniel didn't let himself answer that question, not yet. The week that followed developed its own strange rhythm. Days were filled with the usual routines, getting Lena to school, freelance contract work that paid the bills while he developed Learn Bridge, evening homework battles that Lena approached with theatrical resistance and secret enjoyment. But underneath the ordinary, Anticipation hummed like a frequency Daniel had almost forgotten existed. Tuesday brought the first investor call, a venture capitalist from the dinner who spent 45 minutes asking probing questions about user acquisition costs and scalability models. Daniel answered honestly, acknowledged limitations, explained his vision for growth. The call ended with a request for more detailed financial projections and a tentative interest in a seed round. Wednesday was the meeting with Hale Industries' Education Division Director, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who'd spent 20 years in educational publishing before Victoria recruited her to build Hale's Learning Platform division. Victoria doesn't usually make direct referrals, Patricia said during their video call, getting straight to the point. When she does, I pay attention. So show me what you've built. Daniel walked her through LearnBridge, not the polished pitch version, but the honest one. What worked, what still needed development, where he envisioned the product going. Patricia asked technical questions that revealed deep understanding of both pedagogy and technology, challenging his assumptions without dismissing his approach. The adaptive assessment piece is interesting, she said. We've been trying to solve that problem for 2 years without success. Your pattern recognition algorithm, can you explain the training data methodology? They went 30 minutes over the scheduled call time, diving into technical architecture and integration possibilities. When they finally wrapped up, Patricia's expression had shifted from professional courtesy to genuine interest. I want to bring this to my team, she said. No promises, but I think there might be a partnership opportunity here. We're building a comprehensive K-12 platform, and your adaptive learning engine could be a powerful component. Are you open to licensing conversations? Daniel's heart rate accelerated. Absolutely. Good. I'll have my technical team review your materials and we'll schedule a follow-up. Daniel, this is solid work. Don't undersell it. After the call ended, Daniel sat staring at his laptop screen, trying to process what had just happened. A potential licensing deal with Hale Industries would mean stable funding, technical resources, distribution through their existing education network. It would mean LearnBridge could actually reach the students who needed it, instead of languishing as a beautiful idea he couldn't scale. He wanted to call someone, share the news, but Marie was at work and Lena was at school. His phone sat on the desk, Victoria's messages from the weekend still visible when he unlocked it. He shouldn't text her. This was her employee, her company. She'd know about Patricia's interest through official channels. But his fingers were already typing, just finished the call with Patricia Chen. Thank you doesn't feel adequate, but thank you. The response came while he was making coffee, trying to redirect his nervous energy. Patricia's excellent. Tough, but fair. How'd it go? Better than I expected. She wants her technical team to review everything, mentioned partnership possibilities. That's Patricia speak for, I'm interested but need to justify it to my engineers. You impressed her. Not easy to do. Daniel hesitated, then added, I keep waiting to wake up and find out this week was just an elaborate stress stream. It's not, Victoria wrote back. This is what happens when you build something good and find people who recognize it. Get used to it. A pause, then another message. Still on for Saturday? Or are you too busy being courted by investors now? Something in the teasing tone made Daniel smile. Still on. Looking forward to it. Me too. Those 2 words sat on his screen, simple and complicated at once. Daniel told himself they meant nothing, that successful people were just naturally warm and encouraging. But he read them 3 more times before locking his phone. Thursday brought another investor call and an unexpected email from a conference attendee who'd heard about LearnBridge secondhand and wanted to discuss it. Friday was consumed with updating financial projections and preparing materials for Patricia's technical review. Through it all, Daniel moved in a state of cautious hope that felt foreign after 18 months of struggle. He kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when these opportunities would evaporate like morning fog. But the emails kept coming, the calls kept scheduling, and the possibility that LearnBridge might actually succeed kept growing more real. Friday evening, after Lena was asleep, Daniel stood in front of his closet trying to decide what one wore to casual Saturday coffee with a billionaire CEO. Everything he owned felt too shabby or too formal, too try-hard or too careless. He finally settled on jeans and a button-down, then changed to a Henley, then back to the button-down, until he realized he was being ridiculous and just picked the shirt that didn't make him look completely exhausted. His phone rang. Marie. "So tomorrow's the coffee," she said without preamble. "How do you know about that?" "Lena told me. She's very invested in your social life now, by the way. You've created a monster." Daniel laughed despite himself. "It's just coffee, Marie. Everyone needs to stop reading into it." "Daniel, a gorgeous billionaire asks you for weekend coffee after helping launch your career. We're reading into it because there's something to read." "She's not. It's not like that. She's just being kind." "Uh-huh. And you've been checking your phone every 10 minutes all week for kind messages." "I have not." Lena's exact words were, "Daddy smiles at his phone now like there's a secret inside it." Marie's voice softened. "Honey, I'm not teasing you. I'm saying it's okay if this is more than professional. You're allowed to be interested in someone. I don't even know if she's interested in me that way. She could be gay or married or just genuinely nice to people she mentors. So find out, talk to her, see where it goes." Marie paused. "Daniel, you've spent 7 years being the perfect father, the devoted entrepreneur, the guy who never asks for anything for himself. Maybe it's time to be the guy who shows up for coffee and sees what happens." "What if I'm wrong? What if I read this all wrong and make it awkward?" "Then it's awkward and you move on. But what if you're right and you're too scared to find out?" After they hung up, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet his mind enough for sleep. Marie was right that he'd gotten comfortable in his narrow life. Work, Lena, survival. Adding another person, especially someone like Victoria, felt like inviting complexity he wasn't sure he could manage. But he thought about Victoria's question about loneliness, the way she'd shared her parents' disappointment like it still hurt. He thought about her texting him first, suggesting coffee, saying "me too" when he mentioned looking forward to it. Maybe Marie was right. Maybe it was okay to show up and see what happened. Saturday morning arrived bright and crisp, one of those early spring days where winter was losing its grip but hadn't quite let go. Daniel made Lena breakfast, endured her pointed comments about his outfit choice, and tried to act like this was just a normal errand. "You smell like the fancy soap," Lena observed, "the one you save for important things." "It's just coffee." Huh. She grinned at him, gap-toothed and knowing. "Have fun at your just coffee. Don't forget to smile with your real smile." Marie picked Lena up at 11. They were going to the Science Museum, then to Marie's place for a sleepover. Daniel had the afternoon free, which suddenly felt like too much time and not nearly enough. The cafe Victoria had agreed to was a local place Daniel frequented. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. He arrived 15 minutes early, claimed a corner table, and tried to look casual while his nerves performed acrobatics. Victoria walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, and Daniel felt his breath catch slightly. She was dressed down from the business formal he'd seen at the conference. Dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, minimal makeup. But somehow the casual version was more intimidating than the CEO. She looked approachable and real and nothing like someone who should be meeting him for coffee. "Hey," she said, sliding into the seat across from him with an easy smile. "Sorry, I'm exactly on time. Old habit. I'm perpetually 15 minutes early to everything, so I can't judge." They ordered coffee. Victoria asked detailed questions about the beans and brewing method that surprised Daniel, until he remembered she probably approached everything with the same thorough attention. When the barista left, Victoria turned that attention to him. "So, how are you actually doing? Not the professional update version, the real version." Daniel found himself answering honestly. "Overwhelmed, excited, terrified I'm going to wake up and find out this week was a glitch in the universe." It wasn't a glitch. This is what traction looks like. It feels surreal because you've been struggling for so long that success seems impossible. Is that what happened to you when Hale Industries started taking off? God, yes. I spent the first year convinced we'd implode any second. Every win felt temporary. Every setback felt like confirmation that I'd been fooling everyone, including myself. Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. I had to actively retrain my brain to accept that maybe I was actually good at this, that success wasn't just luck or timing. How long did that take? I'll let you know when it finishes. She smiled, self-deprecating in a way that made her seem more human. I still have moments of imposter syndrome, usually at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep and my brain decides to catalog every mistake I've ever made. 3 a.m. seems to be the universal hour of self-doubt. What keeps you up at 3 a.m.? Daniel considered the question, wondering if I'm doing right by Lena. If building this app is selfish, me chasing a solution that makes me feel useful instead of accepting that maybe she needs something different than what I can provide. That's not what I saw in how you talk about her. What did you see? Victoria met his eyes directly. Someone who understands that the world will constantly try to convince your daughter she's broken and who's building her a bridge to prove them wrong. That's not selfish. That's love backed by action. Something in Daniel's chest loosened. Thank you for that. It's just truth. Victoria paused, then shifted slightly. Can I ask you something? And feel free to tell me if I'm overstepping. After everything you've done for me this week, ask anything. Are you dating anyone? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the conversation's surface. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. No, he said carefully. Haven't really had the bandwidth. Between Lena and LearnBridge, there's not much left for romance. He took a breath. Why do you ask? Victoria held his gaze, and he saw something vulnerable flash across her face before she answered. Because I've been trying to figure out if I'm reading this situation correctly. If these conversations we've been having, at the dinner, over text right now, if they're just professional courtesy or something else. And what do you think they are? I think I invited you to coffee on a Saturday because I wanted to see you again, and work was just a convenient excuse. She said it simply, honestly, without the careful phrasing of someone protecting themselves. I think I've been looking forward to today all week in a way that has nothing to do with education technology. Daniel's heart was racing now. I thought I was imagining that. I thought there was no way someone like you would be interested in someone like me. Someone like me? Successful, powerful, living in a completely different stratosphere than my life. Victoria's expression shifted, something between amusement and frustration. Daniel, you know what I saw when you were standing in that collapsing booth? Someone who'd risked everything for what he believed in, who built something meaningful from nothing but conviction and love for his daughter. That's not less impressive than building a company. It might be more impressive, honestly. I'm broke, Victoria. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, raising a kid on my own, hoping this app works out before I run completely out of runway. That's not exactly stability. And I'm divorced, married to my job, with no idea how to have a relationship that doesn't get swallowed by my work schedule. Victoria leaned forward slightly. I'm not looking for stability. I have stability. Too much of it, honestly. I'm looking for something real. You don't know me well enough to know if I'm real. So let me get to know you. Her voice softened. Look, I'm not asking for promises or definitions. I'm just saying I'd like to keep having these conversations. See where they go. If that sounds like something you'd want too. Daniel sat with the question, feeling the weight of it. This was the moment Marie had told him about, the choice to stay safe or risk possibility. I have a lot of baggage, he said finally. A kid who comes first, always. Financial instability, an ex who left when things got complicated. Not a lot of time or emotional bandwidth for romance that doesn't fit into the margins of my life. Okay. That doesn't scare you? Daniel, I run a company worth $3 billion. I work 70-hour weeks. I have shareholders who think I'm too aggressive and a board that thinks I'm not aggressive enough. My last relationship ended because he said I loved my company more than I loved him, and he wasn't entirely wrong. Victoria's smile was rueful. We've both got baggage. Question is whether we want to see if we can carry it together or if we're better off alone. I don't want to be alone, Daniel admitted, the honesty surprising him. But I'm scared of hurting Lena by bringing someone into her life who might not stay. That's fair. And I'm scared of getting involved with someone whose life I might disrupt or complicate with my work demands. Victoria reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close. How about this? We take it slow. Keep talking. See how it feels. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty. If it doesn't work, we're both adults who can handle that. And if it does work, then we figure it out as we go, together. Daniel looked at her hand near his, at the open honesty in her expression, and made a choice. He closed the distance between their hands, letting his fingers brush hers. "Okay," he said, "let's see where this goes." Victoria's smile transformed her face, genuine joy breaking through the controlled professionalism. "Yeah? Yeah. But fair warning, Lena's going to interrogate you at some point. She's very invested in my social life suddenly. I can handle 9-year-old interrogation. I negotiate with hostile boards regularly. Lena's tougher than any board. Then I'd better bring my A game." They talked for 3 more hours, coffee turning to late lunch neither of them planned. Conversation flowed easily, moving from their families to their fears to the weird pressure of public success versus private struggle. Victoria told stories about navigating corporate politics as a woman younger than most of her executives. Daniel described the particular terror of solo parenting a neurodivergent child without a manual. "The worst part is the judgment," Daniel said. "Other parents looking at you like you're doing it wrong when Lena has a meltdown in public. Like if I was just a better parent, she'd behave normally. I hate that. The assumption that different means deficient. It's exhausting. Some days I want to scream at people that she's not broken. The world is. That if we built systems that value different kinds of intelligence, she'd be thriving instead of struggling. That's why LearnBridge matters so much. Yeah, it's personal in ways I can't fully explain to investors without getting emotional." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I think the emotion is what makes it powerful. People respond to that authenticity. People like you, maybe. But venture capitalists want hockey stick growth projections, not feelings. Some do. The good ones want both, vision backed by genuine understanding of the problem you're solving." She paused. "Daniel, can I tell you something about why I really stopped at your booth that day?" "Please." "I was having a terrible morning. Back-to-back hostile meetings, a board member questioning my judgment, feeling like I was fighting battles on 12 fronts and winning none of them. I was walking the conference floor trying to remember why I do this, why I built a company that sometimes feels like it's consuming me." Victoria's voice went quiet. "And then I saw you, standing there holding up a collapsing banner, and something about the determination in your face made me stop. Like here was someone who refused to give up even when the infrastructure was literally falling apart around him. I was just trying to make it through the day. So was I. But seeing you do it reminded me that the struggle means something when you're fighting for something real." She met his eyes. "So thank you for that, for being someone who still believes in what he's building even when it's hard." Daniel felt something shift between them, an intimacy that went beyond attraction into recognition. "You're welcome. Though I think I should be thanking you for seeing value in a broken booth and a desperate pitch." "It wasn't desperate. It was honest." Victoria checked her phone, made a face. "I have a call in 20 minutes, conference call with Tokyo that I absolutely can't miss." "Of course, I should get home anyway." They stood gathering their things with the awkward awareness of a moment ending. Outside the cafe, the afternoon had shifted toward evening, the light going golden. "This was really nice," Victoria said. "Can we do it again?" "I'd like that." "Good." She hesitated, then stepped closer and kissed his cheek, brief, warm, leaving Daniel slightly breathless. "I'll text you." "Looking forward to it." He watched her walk to her car, a Tesla, because of course, and drive away before heading to his own significantly less impressive vehicle. His phone buzzed as he got in. Lena, texting from Marie's phone. "How was just coffee?" Daniel smiled, typing back, "Really good, Bug. I'll tell you about it tomorrow." "Did you use your real smile?" "Yeah, I used my real smile." "Good. That's the important part. Love you to the moon and back again." Daniel drove home through the city streets, mind replaying the afternoon, Victoria's words about wanting something real, the feeling of her hand near his. He felt lighter than he had in years, like possibility had opened where only struggle had been before. He also felt terrified, because opening himself to this, to Victoria, to hope, to the vulnerability of wanting something for himself, meant risking the careful equilibrium he'd built. It meant admitting that maybe he did want more than just survival, that maybe Lena thriving wasn't enough if it meant he was slowly disappearing into the margins of his own life. Back at the apartment, he poured himself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony as the evening deepened. His laptop was inside, investor emails waiting, Patricia's technical review deadline looming. But for once, Daniel let the work wait. Instead, he thought about Victoria's question, whether they could carry their baggage together or if they were better off alone. He didn't know the answer yet, but he was finally willing to find out. His phone buzzed, a message from Victoria. Made it home. Already looking forward to next time. Sleep well, Daniel. He typed back. You too. And Victoria? Thank you for today. Thank you for saying yes. Daniel sat with those words, watching the city lights come on like stars falling upward, and let himself feel something he'd been avoiding for 7 years. Hope. Not just for LearnBridge or for Lena's future, but for himself. For the possibility that his life could include more than responsibility and struggle. That maybe, just maybe, he deserved the same chances he was fighting to create for his daughter. Inside, his laptop chimed with a new email notification. He ignored it, choosing instead to stay in this moment, balanced between past and future, between fear and possibility. Tomorrow would bring work and obligations and the reality of building something from nothing. Tonight, he could just sit here and believe that sometimes, when you're brave enough to stay instead of running, something beautiful walks through the door. The next morning arrived with Lena bursting through the door at 8 a.m., Marie trailing behind with coffee and knowing looks. Tell me everything, Lena demanded, dropping her overnight bag and climbing onto the couch beside Daniel with the intensity of an investigative journalist. Was she nice? Did you laugh? Are you going to see her again? Good morning to you too, Bug. Morning. Now answer the questions. Marie settled into the armchair, clearly planning to supervise this interrogation. Daniel shot her a look that she returned with innocent eyebrow raises. Yes, she was nice. Yes, we laughed. And yes, I'm going to see her again. What's her name? Victoria. Lena tested the name silently, her expression thoughtful. What does she do? She runs a technology company. A big one. Bigger than your app? Much bigger. She has thousands of employees. Does she like kids? The question carried weight beyond curiosity. Lena had learned early that not all adults wanted children in their lives, that her existence could be a deal breaker in ways that still hurt to acknowledge. I don't know yet, Daniel said honestly, but I'll find out before this goes any further. You come first, always. You know that. I know. Lena leaned against him. But you're allowed to have people too. You don't have to be alone just because of me. I'm not alone. I have you. That's different. I'm your kid. You need grown-up people who make you happy in grown-up ways. Marie laughed. When did you become a relationship counselor? I pay attention, Lena said with dignity. Daddy's been sad quiet for a long time. Yesterday he was happy quiet. That's better. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He thought he'd hidden the loneliness well, that Lena was too young to notice the difference between contentment and resignation. You're right, he admitted. I have been sad quiet. I didn't realize you could tell. You do this thing with your shoulders. They go up and stay up, like you're carrying something heavy all the time. Yesterday, when you came home, they were down, relaxed. Lena looked up at him with those two wise eyes. I like your shoulders better when they're down. Me too, kiddo, me too. Marie stayed for breakfast, ostensibly to help Lena with a school project, but really to extract more details about Victoria once Lena was distracted with art supplies. So it's actually happening, Marie said, keeping her voice low. You're dating again. I don't know if I'd call it dating yet. We had coffee, we talked. We agreed to see each other again. Daniel, she kissed you. On the cheek. That could be friendly. Was it friendly? He thought about the moment. Victoria's brief hesitation, the warmth of her lips against his skin, the way she'd met his eyes afterward with something that definitely wasn't just friendship. No, he admitted. It wasn't just friendly. So what are you going to do about it? Take it slow. See where it goes. Try not to catastrophize about all the ways it could go wrong. That last part's going to be hardest for you. I'm aware. Marie was quiet for a moment, then reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm happy for you. You deserve this. Someone who sees you, who values you, who makes you want to relax your shoulders. What if I screw it up? What if I bring her into Lena's life and then it falls apart and Lena gets hurt? What if you don't give it a chance and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been? Marie countered. Lena's resilient, and she's smart enough to know that loving people always carries risk. You can't protect her from that by hiding yourself away. Daniel knew she was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different territories entirely. The week developed its own rhythm, different from before. Work consumed his days. Investor calls, technical reviews, updating LearnBridge based on Patricia's team's feedback. But now his evenings included texts from Victoria, conversations that started about work and drifted into personal territory with increasing ease. They talked about their childhoods, their failures, the moments that had shaped who they'd become. Victoria described growing up feeling like she was constantly performing for parents who measured worth by traditional markers of success. Daniel shared stories about his own parents, good people who died in a car accident when he was 25, leaving him with grief and the knowledge that time with people you loved was never guaranteed. Is that why you're so focused on being present for Lena? Victoria asked during one late-night call. Because you learned how quickly people can disappear? Probably. I saw how much my parents missed by always planning for a future that never came. They were going to travel when they retired, spend more time together when Dad's business stabilized, reconnect when the pressure eased. Daniel's voice went quiet. They died 2 weeks before their planned anniversary trip to Italy. All those some days they'd been saving up just evaporated. That's heartbreaking. It was, but it also taught me something important, that presence matters more than plans, that the only guaranteed time is right now. He paused. Is that too heavy for a Wednesday night phone call? No, I asked because I wanted to know. Victoria's voice softened. My parents are still alive, and I barely talk to them. Every conversation becomes a referendum on my choices, a reminder that I'm not living the life they wanted for me. Sometimes I wonder if that's worse than loss, having them there but fundamentally unable to connect. Have you tried talking to them about it? A few times. It always ends the same way, them defensive, me frustrated, both of us retreating to our corners. After a while, it seemed easier to just maintain polite distance. That sounds lonely. It is, but I got used to it, built a life where I didn't need their approval. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then I hit 40 and realized I'd built this incredible career and had no one to share it with. No partner, no kids, no family who actually understood what I'd created or why it mattered. Is that something you want? Partner, kids, family? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I thought I did. I was married for 3 years in my early 30s. He was another CEO, someone who supposedly understood the demands of running a company. But we were both so consumed with our own success that we forgot to build something together. By the time we admitted it wasn't working, we'd become strangers who happened to share an address. Did you want kids with him? We talked about it. Always someday, when things calmed down, when the companies were more stable. Then suddenly we were divorced, and someday never came. Her voice carried old regret. Now I'm 43. Biologically, I could still have kids, but realistically, my life isn't set up for that. I work constantly. I travel every week. I wouldn't be the kind of parent a child deserves. You don't know that. Don't I? Look at my schedule, Daniel. I'm lucky if I sleep 6 hours. How would I fit a child into that? The same way anyone does. By deciding they're more important than work. By restructuring your life around what matters most. Easy to say. Harder to do when you've built an identity around professional success. I'm not judging. I'm just saying people change their priorities all the time. You're not locked into who you were 5 years ago. Victoria was quiet again, thinking. Is that what you did? Changed your priorities after Lena was born? I had to. She didn't come with the manual, and the standard approaches weren't working, so I learned to be flexible, to question assumptions, to build a life that worked for who she actually was instead of who I'd imagined she'd be. Daniel smiled at the memory. Best decision I ever made, even though it meant walking away from career advancement and financial stability. Do you regret it? Not for a second. I I regret that it had to be a choice, that our systems are so inflexible that being present for my kid meant sacrificing professional growth. But I don't regret choosing her. You're a good father, Daniel. I'm a trying father. There's a difference. They talked until nearly midnight, when Victoria had to prep for an early meeting and Daniel needed to sleep before Lena's alarm went off at 6:30. But before they hung up, Victoria asked a question that shifted something between them. Would you want to have dinner this week? Somewhere nicer than coffee? Just the two of us? Daniel's heart accelerated. Dinner was different from coffee. Dinner was intentional, romantic, a clear signal that this was moving beyond friendly interest. I'd like that, he said. When works for you? Friday? I'm in town all week for once. Friday's good. Lena's with Marie anyway. Perfect. I'll make a reservation somewhere. Nothing too formal, but nicer than the cafe. After they hung up, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process the fact that he had an actual date with Victoria Hale. Not coffee, not networking, a real dinner date with someone who made him feel seen in ways he'd forgotten were possible. Thursday brought breakthrough news on LearnBridge. Patricia's technical team had completed their review and wanted to move forward with partnership discussions. The proposed terms were generous: licensing fees, technical support, integration into Hale's education platform with Daniel maintaining creative control of the adaptive learning algorithms. This is significant money, Patricia said during the call. Enough to hire a small team, accelerate development, maybe even draw a salary yourself instead of living on fumes. Daniel felt dizzy with the implications. Real funding, a team, the possibility of LearnBridge actually reaching scale instead of remaining a beautiful prototype he couldn't afford to launch. When do you need an answer? He asked. Take a week. Review the terms with a lawyer if you have one. Make sure you're comfortable with everything. This is a good deal, Daniel, but it's also a big decision. I want you to be certain. After the call, Daniel sat at his small kitchen table staring at the contract Patricia had emailed, trying to absorb what was happening. 18 months ago, he'd cashed out his retirement to build an app. Now, a billion-dollar company wanted to partner with him, to integrate his work into their platform, to pay him enough that he could stop choosing between groceries and development costs. He wanted to call Victoria, share the news, hear her reaction. But something held him back, the awareness that she'd facilitated this connection, that celebrating with her might feel complicated given her professional relationship to the deal. Instead, he called Marie, who screamed so loudly he had to pull the phone away from his ear. Daniel, this is incredible. Do you realize what this means? That I might actually be able to afford new shoes for Lena? That your work is being recognized? That you took a massive risk and it's paying off? That you were right about what you were building? Her voice went softer. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, Marie. I couldn't have done it without you. All those times you watched Lena, covered expenses when I came up short, believed in this even when it looked impossible. That's what family does. We show up. She paused. Are you going to tell Victoria? I don't know. It feels weird celebrating a deal that came through her company. Daniel, she introduced you to Patricia because she believed in your work, not as a favor. This deal is happening because LearnBridge is good, not because Victoria pulled strings. I know that intellectually. So tell her, let her celebrate with you. She clearly cares about your success. Marie was right, of course. Daniel drafted a text 3 times before finally sending something simple. Patricia's team finished their review. They want to move forward with partnership terms. Thank you for believing in this. Victoria's response came immediately. That's fantastic. I'm so happy for you. You earned this, Daniel. When can I take you to dinner to celebrate? You're already taking me to dinner tomorrow. Then we have 2 things to celebrate. Wear something nice. Daniel smiled at his phone, Marie's earlier words echoing in his mind. Victoria clearly cares about your success. Maybe it was time to stop questioning her interest and just accept it as real. Friday evening arrived with Daniel standing in front of his closet, experiencing déjà vu from the previous weekend. He'd upgraded his wardrobe slightly. A new shirt that didn't have coffee stains, dress shoes that weren't held together with hope and denial. But he still felt underprepared for dinner with someone who probably had a personal stylist. Lena appeared in his doorway, already dressed for her sleepover at Marie's, carrying the small overnight bag she'd decorated with constellation stickers. "You look nice," she said. "Fancy nice, not job interview nice." "There's a difference?" "Job interview nice is when you're trying to impress someone you don't know. Fancy nice is when you want someone you like to think you look good." She tilted her head, studying him. "This is fancy nice." "When did you become an expert on dating attire?" "I watch a lot of movies when you think I'm asleep." She came over and straightened his collar unnecessarily. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "That's good. It means you care about what happens." "You're way too wise for 9 years old, you know that?" "I've been telling you that for years." She hugged him quickly. "Have fun, Daddy. Relax your shoulders. Use your real smile." Marie arrived to collect her, shooting Daniel an encouraging thumbs up as they left. Then the apartment was quiet, and Daniel was alone with his nerves and the knowledge that in 30 minutes he was going to dinner with a woman who somehow made him feel both comfortable and completely out of his depth. The restaurant Victoria had chosen was called Prospect, a place with soft lighting and exposed brick and the kind of understated elegance that suggested serious money without being ostentatious about it. Daniel arrived first, gave Victoria's name to the host, and was led to a corner table that offered both privacy and a view of the Seattle skyline. He ordered water, checked his phone compulsively, tried to look like someone who belonged in restaurants where the napkins were cloth and the menus didn't list prices. Then Victoria walked in, and Daniel forgot to be nervous. She wore a deep blue dress that was simultaneously simple and stunning, her hair loose around her shoulders, and when she smiled at him, the whole restaurant seemed to blur into background noise. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Sorry I'm late. Meeting ran over." "You're not late. I'm just chronically early." "I remember. 15 minutes early to everything." She looked around the restaurant. "Have you been here before?" "No, this is significantly nicer than my usual dinner spots." "Which are?" "Wherever Lena wants to go." "Lately that means a lot of pizza and Ethiopian food." "Ethiopian food is excellent, though probably less romantic than this." The word hung between them. Romantic, making explicit what they'd been dancing around all week. "Is that what this is?" Daniel asked. "Romance?" Victoria met his eyes directly. "I'd like it to be, if you would too." "I would. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that someone like you is interested in someone like me. We really need to address this someone like you thing you keep doing." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, you're brilliant, dedicated, building something meaningful with almost no resources. You're a devoted father, a good person, and someone who makes me feel like I can be honest instead of performing all the time. That's rare, that's valuable. Stop underselling yourself." "I'm working on it." "Good." They ordered dinner. The waiter recited specials in a tone suggesting everything was life-changing, and they both tried not to laugh. When he left, Victoria raised her wine glass. "To LearnBridge's partnership with Hale Industries. And to the man who built something good enough to deserve it." Daniel clinked his glass against hers. "To taking chances on collapsing booths and struggling entrepreneurs." "I didn't take a chance. I recognized quality when I saw it." She sipped her wine. "How are you feeling about the partnership terms?" "Honestly, terrified. This is everything I wanted, and I keep waiting for the catch." "There's no catch. It's a fair deal for both sides. Patricia doesn't make offers she doesn't believe in." "I know. Intellectually, I know that. But emotionally, I'm still the guy whose booth was falling apart 2 weeks ago. Success feels fake." "It's not fake." "This is what happens when talent meets opportunity." Victoria set down her glass. "Can I tell you a story?" "Please." "When I was 26, I pitched my first big investor. Spent weeks preparing, had every slide perfect, rehearsed until I could recite the presentation in my sleep. Got to the meeting, and he interrupted me 3 minutes in to say he'd already decided to invest. Said he didn't need the pitch. He'd done his research, knew the market, trusted my vision." She smiled at the memory. "I was convinced he was lying, that there had to be a trick, that no one actually said yes that easily. Spent the next 2 days waiting for him to change his mind." "Did he?" "No. He became one of my strongest supporters, stayed on the board until we went public. But I almost talked myself out of accepting his offer because I couldn't believe it was real." Her eyes met Daniel's. Don't do what I did. Don't waste energy questioning good things when they happen. Just accept them and keep building. Is that what you're doing with us? Accepting something good? I'm trying to. It's easier to advise than to practice. Their food arrived, providing a natural break in the intensity. They ate and talked about lighter things, favorite books, travel disasters, the comedy of trying to maintain dignity while everything around you collapsed. Victoria told a story about a presentation to the Japanese board where her translator had accidentally made every sentence sound like an insult. Daniel described Lena's recent obsession with documenting every bird she saw, leading to hundreds of blurry photos of pigeons. She sounds wonderful, Victoria said. I'd like to meet her. Eventually, I mean, when you're comfortable with that. Daniel's chest tightened, not with fear, but with the significance of the offer. You'd want to meet her? Of course, she's the most important person in your life. If this is going somewhere, I'd need to know her. Victoria paused. Unless you think it's too soon. I don't know what the timeline is supposed to be. I haven't done this since before Lena was born. There's no supposed to be. We figure it out as we go. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. But I want you to know I'm serious about this, about you. I'm not interested in something casual that stays safely compartmentalized from real life. What are you interested in? Seeing if we can build something real, something that fits into both our complicated lives instead of requiring us to be different people. Daniel turned his hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I'd like that too, but I need you to understand something. Okay? Lena comes first, always. If there's ever a conflict between your needs and hers, she wins. If this gets serious and then falls apart, I need to know you won't disappear in a way that hurts her. I need to know you understand what you're signing up for. I do understand, and I respect that she comes first. Any parent who didn't prioritize their child wouldn't be someone I'd want to be with anyway. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened slightly. I can't promise we won't fall apart, but I can promise that if we do, I'll handle it with care for both of you. I won't ghost, won't disappear, won't be cruel. You have my word on that. Okay, Daniel said, feeling something settle in his chest. Then, yes, I'd like you to meet Lena when it feels right. They finished dinner slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. The conversation flowed between serious and playful, past and future, fear and hope. Victoria talked about the pressure of running a company through changing markets, the loneliness of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Daniel shared the terror of solo parenting through Lena's diagnosis, the grief of watching her struggle with systems designed for different brains. I keep thinking about what you said, Victoria admitted, about restructuring your life around what matters most. I've been wondering if I'm brave enough to do that. What would that look like for you? I don't know exactly. Delegating more, trusting my executive team, accepting that the company can function without me controlling every detail. Making space for a life that isn't just work. She met his eyes. Making space for you, for whatever this becomes. That's terrifying. It is. But staying where I am, successful and lonely, that's terrifying too. At least this kind of scary comes with possibility. They left the restaurant around 10, stepping out into cool Seattle night air. Victoria's car was being brought around by valet, and they stood on the sidewalk in that awkward space between evening ending and whatever came next. Thank you for tonight, Daniel said. This was really perfect. It was. Victoria stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. Can I see you again soon, or is that too eager? I don't think eager is bad. I'd like to see you again too. Good. She leaned in, and this time when she kissed him, it wasn't his cheek but his lips, brief and soft and carrying a promise of more. When she pulled back, her smile was genuine. I'll text you tomorrow. Looking forward to it. He watched her drive away, then stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, trying to process the fact that this was actually happening. That someone like Victoria, brilliant and successful and complicated, was genuinely interested in building something with him. His phone buzzed. A text from Marie. Lena wants to know if you're using your real smile. I told her I'd find out. Daniel smiled at his phone, then took a selfie, grinning, genuinely happy, and sent it to Marie with the caption, "Real smile confirmed." The response came immediately. That's what I thought. She'll be pleased. Now get home and get some sleep. You look ridiculously happy, and it's making me emotional. Daniel drove home through quiet streets, mind replaying the evening, Victoria's words about making space for possibility. He thought about his conversation with Lena that morning, about shoulders finally relaxing, about the difference between sad quiet and happy quiet. For 7 years, he'd been holding himself together through sheer determination, building a life for Lena while forgetting to build one for himself. Now suddenly there were partnership contracts that could stabilize their finances, and a woman who made him remember what hope felt like, and possibilities that extended beyond just surviving to actually thriving. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Back at the apartment, Daniel stood on the balcony one more time, looking out at the city. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Made it home. Thank you for tonight, for being willing to take this chance with me. He typed back, thank you for seeing something worth taking a chance on. I see a lot worth taking chances on. Looking forward to discovering more of it. Daniel went to bed that night feeling something he'd almost forgotten. Anticipation for a future that held more than responsibility. A future that might include partnership and romance, and the possibility that his life could expand instead of contract. He fell asleep smiling, Victoria's goodnight text still glowing on his phone, and dreamed of bridges that actually held. The following weeks unfolded with a momentum that Daniel had to consciously remind himself was real. Partnership contracts were signed, funding appeared in LearnBridge's previously anemic bank account, and he hired his first employee, a developer named Marcus, who understood adaptive learning systems and didn't blink when Daniel admitted the entire operation was currently running from his kitchen table. But parallel to the professional transformation, something else was building. Victoria became a constant presence in his life, not overwhelming, but consistent. They texted throughout the day, called most evenings after Lena was asleep, and managed to carve out time for dinner or coffee twice a week, despite Victoria's relentless schedule. What surprised Daniel most was how natural it felt. He'd expected complications, awkwardness, the friction of two very different lives trying to merge. Instead, he found someone who asked about Lena's day before discussing business, who remembered that Thursdays were hard because of occupational therapy appointments, who sent him articles about neurodiversity and education with notes like, "Thought you'd find this interesting." 3 weeks after their first dinner, Daniel made a decision. "I think it's time," he told Marie over the phone, "for Victoria to meet Lena." "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be. They're both important to me. They should know each other." "How are you going to handle it?" "Casual, low pressure, maybe lunch somewhere Lena likes, so she feels comfortable." Daniel paused. "Is this a terrible idea?" "No, it's a brave idea. There's a difference." He brought it up with Victoria that night during their call. "I've been thinking," he started, then stopped, trying to find the right words. "That's usually dangerous," Victoria teased. "What about?" "You meeting Lena, if you're still interested." There was a pause, and when Victoria spoke, her voice carried genuine warmth. "I'm very interested. When were you thinking?" "Maybe this Sunday? Lunch somewhere casual. There's a place she loves that has good food and a playground nearby. So if things get overwhelming, she has an escape route." "You've thought this through." "I've been catastrophizing about every possible outcome for 3 days." Victoria laughed. "That sounds about right." "Daniel, I'm nervous too. I want her to like me, and I have no idea how to talk to 9-year-olds. Just be yourself. Lena's excellent at detecting bullshit, so authenticity works better than trying to be someone you're not." Noted. "Should I bring anything? Do kids like gifts? Is that weird?" "You don't have to bring anything. Just show up and be willing to answer approximately 7,000 questions about everything." "I can handle that. I negotiate with venture capitalists regularly." "Lena's tougher than venture capitalists." Sunday morning, Daniel woke to find Lena already dressed and reorganizing her bookshelf for the 3rd time. "You're nervous," he observed from her doorway. "I'm not nervous. I'm strategically preparing." "For what?" "For meeting Victoria. I need to make sure she understands what matters to me, so I'm organizing my books in a way that shows my interests clearly." Lena stepped back, surveying her work with satisfaction. "This way she can see I like fantasy but also science, and that I organize by emotional resonance rather than arbitrary categories like genre or author." "Lena, you don't have to impress her." "I'm not trying to impress her. I'm trying to make sure she's good enough for you. Lena turned to face him, her expression serious. You like her a lot. I can tell. So I need to make sure she's nice and that she understands you're important. Daniel knelt down to her level. Bug, that's very sweet, but you don't have to protect me. I'm the parent. That's my job. Parents can need protecting too, especially single parents who forget to take care of themselves because they're too busy taking care of everyone else. She said it matter-of-factly, like explaining a mathematical proof. So I'm going to make sure Victoria knows you're special. When did you get so wise? I keep telling you, I was born this way. You're just slow to notice. They arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, because of course they did. It was a family-friendly place called the Greenhouse, all windows and plants, and a menu that accommodated every dietary restriction. Lena chose a table near the window where she could see the parking lot. So I can observe her arrival and assess her body language, she explained when Daniel asked. You're 9, not a behavioral analyst. I'm 9 and observant. There's overlap. Victoria pulled up exactly on time, and Daniel watched Lena's expression as she took in the Tesla, the way Victoria checked her reflection before getting out, the slight hesitation in her walk that suggested she was as nervous as they were. She's pretty, Lena said, and she looks worried. That's good. Why is that good? Because it means she cares about making a good impression. People who don't care don't worry. Victoria spotted them through the window and waved. Daniel waved back, feeling his heart rate accelerate. This moment felt enormous. 2 parts of his life converging in ways that could either strengthen everything or complicate it beyond repair. Victoria walked in carrying a small bag that she tried to hide behind her purse. When she reached their table, she smiled at Lena first, then Daniel. Hi, she said. You must be Lena. Your dad talks about you constantly. Lena studied her with unselfconscious intensity. What does he say? That you're brilliant, that you see patterns other people miss, and that you taught yourself constellation navigation from library books. That's accurate. What else? Victoria sat down, setting the bag on the empty chair. That you have excellent taste in Ethiopian food, that you're building an elaborate imaginary world with consistent internal logic, and that you ask questions that make him rethink everything he thought he knew. Lena's expression shifted slightly, not quite a smile, but a softening. Also accurate, did you bring me a present? I can see the bag. Lena, Daniel warned. It's okay, Victoria said. Yes, I brought something, but I wasn't sure if it was appropriate, so I can take it back if it's weird. What is it? Victoria pulled out the bag and handed it to Lena. Inside was a book, a beautiful hardcover edition of a fantasy series Lena had mentioned wanting during one of Daniel's conversations with Victoria. Daddy told you I wanted this, Lena said, not quite accusatory but testing. He did, but I also checked to make sure it was a first edition with the original illustrations because he said you care about how books are made, not just what's in them. Lena opened the book carefully, examining the binding and illustrations with the attention of someone who understood craftsmanship. This is a very nice edition. The binding is sewn, not glued. That means it will last longer. I'm glad you like it. I didn't say I liked it yet. I said it was nice, that there's a difference. But Lena's fingers traced the cover with obvious appreciation. Thank you. This was thoughtful. They ordered food, and Daniel watched the two of them interact with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Lena asked questions with her usual directness, and Victoria answered without condescension or evasion. Why do you want to date my dad? Lena asked between bites of her grilled cheese. Victoria didn't hesitate. Because he's kind and brilliant, and he makes me feel like I can be honest instead of performing all the time. And because he talks about you the way everyone deserves to be talked about, like you're exactly who you're supposed to be. That's a good answer. Do you want kids? Lena, Daniel interjected, that's personal. It's relevant. If she wants kids and doesn't have them, she might try to replace me or make me different. I need to know. Victoria met Lena's eyes directly. I don't want to replace you or change you. You're not a placeholder for something else. You're a whole person who exists completely separate from my relationship with your dad. But do you want kids? I thought I did, a long time ago. Now I'm not sure. I think I want meaningful relationships more than I want a specific family structure. Victoria paused, choosing her words carefully. If your dad and I keep seeing each other, and if that becomes serious, then you and I would need to figure out what kind of relationship works for us. Not mother-daughter because you have a dad and that's your family, but something real, where we both show up as who we actually are. Lena considered this, her expression thoughtful. I like that answer too. You're better at this than I expected. Thanks, I think? It's a compliment. I had low expectations because most adults are bad at talking to kids. They either talk down to us or pretend we're small adults. You're doing neither. Victoria smiled, her real smile, the one Daniel had learned to recognize. I'm just being honest. Seems like you value that. I do. Dishonesty is inefficient and disrespectful. Lena returned to her grilled cheese, apparently satisfied. You can keep dating my dad, but if you hurt him, I'll be very disappointed in you. That's fair. I'd be disappointed in me, too. The rest of lunch was easier, the initial tension dissolved by Lena's approval. They talked about books and constellation patterns, and why Ethiopian food was superior to most other cuisines. Victoria asked Lena about her imaginary world, and Lena launched into an elaborate explanation of the governmental structure she'd created, complete with constitutional frameworks and economic systems. She's making it into a graphic novel, Daniel explained when Lena paused for breath. We're working on illustration techniques. I'd love to see it sometime, Victoria said. Lena studied her again, that assessing look. Maybe, if you're still around in a few weeks. After lunch, they walked to the nearby park. Lena ran ahead to the playground, leaving Daniel and Victoria trailing behind. Well, Daniel asked, what do you think? I think she's extraordinary, exactly as brilliant and perceptive as you described. Victoria slipped her hand into his. And terrifying. I feel like I just passed the world's most important interview. You did great. The fact that she's letting you see her graphic novel is basically a marriage proposal in Lena speak. No pressure then. They found a bench where they could watch Lena climb the elaborate structure with the unself-conscious confidence of someone who trusted her body completely. Victoria leaned against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of casual intimacy that still felt new enough to be thrilling. Thank you for this, she said quietly. For trusting me enough to include me in this part of your life. Thank you for showing up, for caring about what she thinks, for being honest with her. She deserves honesty. Kids always do, even when it's uncomfortable. Victoria paused. I was serious about what I said, about figuring out our relationship independently of my relationship with you. I don't want her to feel like she has to like me just because you do. She'll like you or not on her own terms. That's how Lena operates. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lena play, and Daniel felt something settle in his chest, a rightness he hadn't expected. The strange little family configuration they were building felt more solid than anything he'd constructed from planning and intention. The week that followed brought more integration. Victoria started timing her work schedule around Lena's routines without being asked, calling after 8 when Lena was in bed, texting during school hours instead of evenings, understanding that Thursday nights were hard and Friday mornings were better. Small accommodations that showed she was paying attention to the actual shape of their lives instead of trying to force them into a more convenient configuration. Daniel signed the final partnership papers with Hale Industries, and LearnBridge officially integrated into their education platform. The first round of beta testing showed exactly what he'd hoped: dramatic engagement increases across diverse learner populations, particularly among neurodivergent students who'd been struggling in traditional frameworks. The data's incredible, Patricia told him during their weekly check-in. We're seeing sustained engagement rates 30% higher than our baseline platform. Parents are emailing us saying their kids are actually excited about learning again. That's what I built it for, Daniel said, feeling vindication and relief in equal measure. Kids like Lena, who get told they're the problem when really it's the delivery system that's broken. Well, you fixed the delivery system. Now we just need to scale it. Scaling meant more hiring, more resources, more structure. Daniel brought on 2 more developers and a part-time UX designer. He moved LearnBridge operations from his kitchen table to a small office space he could actually afford. He started drawing a real salary for the first time in 18 months, enough that he could buy groceries without calculating every purchase. But with success came new pressures. Investors wanted growth projections. Patricia's team needed faster iteration on features. The platform integration timeline was aggressive, leaving Daniel working 12-hour days trying to meet deadlines while maintaining the integrity of what he'd built. He was exhausted and exhilarated and stretched thinner than he'd been since Lena's diagnosis. Victoria noticed first. "You're doing the shoulder thing again," she said during dinner at his apartment, a quiet Tuesday night when Lena was asleep and they'd managed to carve out a few hours together. "What shoulder thing?" "The tension. Like you're carrying something too heavy." She reached over, pressing gently on the tight muscles. "When's the last time you slept more than 5 hours?" "I don't know. Last week sometime?" "Daniel." "I'm fine. Just busy. This is good busy, success busy." Success busy still leads to burnout busy if you don't pace yourself. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't build something sustainable if you're running on fumes." "I don't have a choice. The timeline's aggressive, we've got deliverables, investors expecting results. So delegate, hire more help, trust your team to carry some of the weight." "I can't afford more help yet, and the team's already stretched." Victoria was quiet for a moment, and Daniel could practically hear her thinking through solutions. What if Hale Industries advanced some of the Q2 licensing fees? That would give you capital to expand the team now instead of waiting. "I can't ask for that." "You're not asking, I'm offering, as a business decision, not a favor." She held up a hand before he could argue. "Daniel, we need LearnBridge to succeed. The integration's a cornerstone of our education platform strategy. Advancing fees to ensure you can deliver quality work on schedule makes financial sense. It also looks like my girlfriend is giving me special treatment." "I'm not your girlfriend. I'm the CEO of a company that has a vested interest in our partner's success." But she smiled when she said it. "Though I am also someone who cares about you enough to not want to watch you work yourself to exhaustion, trying to prove you deserve success you've already earned." Daniel wanted to argue, but he was too tired and she was too right. He'd been running on determination and anxiety for weeks, afraid that if he slowed down, the momentum would evaporate and everything would collapse back to struggle. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll talk to Patricia about advancing the fees, but only if it genuinely makes business sense, not as charity." "Deal." Victoria pulled him closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Now tell me about something that's not work. How was Lena's day?" They talked about Lena's latest constellation project and the elaborate fort she'd built in the living room using every blanket they owned. They talked about Victoria's ongoing battle with her board over strategic direction and her mother's latest phone call suggesting Victoria was wasting her potential on computer games. "She still doesn't understand what I do," Victoria said, frustration leaking through. 20 years building a company, and she still introduces me as her daughter who could have been a lawyer. That must hurt. It's exhausting more than hurtful at this point. I've stopped expecting her to understand. "Have you tried showing her? Like actually bringing her to the office, showing her what you've built?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She came once. Spent the whole time criticizing the open office layout and asking when I was going to settle down and give her grandchildren." "That's rough. I'm sorry, Gus." "It's fine. I have other people who see what I've accomplished." She squeezed his hand. "Including you." They sat in comfortable silence, exhaustion settling over both of them like a familiar blanket. Daniel was nearly asleep when Victoria asked a question that jolted him awake. "Where do you see this going? Us, I mean." He turned to face her, suddenly alert. "Where do you want it to go?" "I asked first." Daniel took a breath, deciding on honesty. "I see it becoming something real. Something that isn't just dating, but actually building a life together. I see you being part of Lena's life in a meaningful way, and me being part of yours. I see possibility instead of just survival." "That's what I see too," Victoria said quietly. "But I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'll screw it up. That I'm too consumed with work, that I don't know how to make space for this. That I'll hurt you both by being unable to prioritize you the way you deserve." "Victoria, you're already prioritizing us. You adjusted your entire schedule around Lena's routines without being asked. You show up when you say you will. You ask real questions and listen to real answers. That's not someone who doesn't know how to make space." "But what happens when work gets intense? When there's a crisis and I have to choose between being present for you and handling a company emergency, then you handle the emergency, and we figure it out. I'm not asking you to stop being CEO. I'm just asking you to include us in your life instead of treating us like a compartmentalized hobby. Victoria was quiet, processing. What if we tried something? What kind of something? What if I worked from here a few days a week? Not all the time, but enough to be present in your actual daily life instead of just scheduled dinners. She rushed on before he could respond. I know your apartment is small and you've got Lena and work, but I could set up in a corner somewhere, handle my calls and meetings remotely. That way I'm here when Lena gets home from school, when you need to talk through a problem, when life is actually happening instead of just on weekends and evenings. Daniel felt his chest tighten with something that might have been hope or fear or both. You'd want to do that? I'd want to try. See if we can actually integrate our lives instead of just visiting each other's. What about your office? Your team? They'll survive. I've been working remotely more anyway since the pandemic proved we don't all need to be in the same building constantly. And honestly, the enforced distance might be good. Make my executives actually solve problems instead of running to me for every decision. Okay, Daniel said, the word coming out more certain than he felt. Let's try it. They started small. Victoria showed up Wednesday afternoon with her laptop and a determination to prove she could work from Daniel's tiny apartment without disrupting everything. She claimed the kitchen table, fielded calls with professional efficiency, and somehow managed to make the cramped space feel less chaotic instead of more. When Lena came home from school, she found Victoria there and stopped short in surprise. You're here, Lena said, not quite a question. I'm working from your place today. Is that okay? Lena studied her, then looked at Daniel with a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly, leaving the decision to her. It's okay, Lena said finally, but you should know I'm loud when I do homework. I talk to myself and sometimes I sing problem-solving songs. That's fine. I sing in meetings sometimes too. Usually they just mute me. Lena giggled, the sound bright and unexpected. You're weird for a CEO. I'll take that as a compliment. They developed a rhythm over the following weeks. Victoria worked from the apartment 2 or 3 days a week, navigating conference calls while Lena practiced piano in the background and Daniel coded in the tiny office space he'd carved out of what used to be a storage closet. It was cramped and chaotic and somehow worked better than any of them expected. Lena started treating Victoria like a fixture, asking her opinion on homework problems, explaining constellation patterns during dinner, occasionally climbing into her lap while Victoria worked through emails. Victoria navigated it all with surprising grace, learning when Lena needed space and when she needed attention, asking before touching, respecting boundaries without making Lena feel like she was a problem to be managed. She's good with her, Marie observed during one of her visits, watching Victoria and Lena debate the structural integrity of a blanket fort. Natural in a way I didn't expect. She listens, Daniel said. Actually listens instead of just waiting to respond. Lena notices that. And how are you doing with all this integration? Terrified and hopeful in equal measure. That sounds about right for someone falling in love. Daniel looked at Marie sharply. I didn't say I was in love. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face when you look at her. Marie smiled. It's good, seeing you like this. Open instead of just surviving. The word love circled in Daniel's mind after Marie left. He hadn't let himself name what he felt for Victoria, afraid that naming it would make it too real, too vulnerable. But watching her now, sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Lena map imaginary trade routes, he couldn't deny what was becoming obvious. He was falling in love with her. Maybe had already fallen. The realization was terrifying. That night, after Lena was asleep and Victoria was packing up her work things, Daniel found the courage to speak. Stay, he said quietly. Victoria looked up from her laptop. I was planning to. I have one more call with London in an hour. No, I mean stay. Tonight. Here. Understanding dawned in her eyes. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, Victoria leaving each evening, maintaining careful boundaries, neither of them ready to cross into greater intimacy. But something had shifted, permission settling between them. Are you sure? Victoria asked. I'm sure. If you are. She smiled, and it was the real smile, the unguarded one. I'm sure. They made love slowly that night, learning each other with the careful attention of people who understood that this mattered. Afterward, lying tangled together in Daniel's too small bed, Victoria traced patterns on his chest and asked the question Daniel had been avoiding. Where's this going, Daniel? Really going? He could have deflected, could have said it was too soon to know. Instead, he chose honesty. I'm falling in love with you, he said. I'm terrified of it, and I'm trying not to catastrophize about all the ways it could go wrong, but that's what's happening. Victoria was quiet for so long, Daniel thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then she turned to face him, her eyes bright in the dim light. I'm already in love with you, she whispered. Have been for weeks. I was just too scared to say it first. Relief and joy crashed through Daniel in equal waves. He pulled her closer, feeling her heart beat against his chest, and let himself believe that maybe this wasn't temporary, that maybe, impossibly, they were actually building something that could last. I love you, he said again, testing the words. I love you too, Victoria answered and kissed him like sealing a promise. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, Daniel's shoulders were completely relaxed. Morning came with Lena standing in Daniel's bedroom doorway, her expression carefully neutral as she processed the sight of Victoria asleep in her father's bed. Good morning, Bug, Daniel said quietly, slipping out from under the covers and guiding Lena back to the hallway before she could wake Victoria. She stayed over, Lena observed, not quite a question. She did. Is that okay? Lena considered this with her usual seriousness. Is she going to stay over a lot now? Maybe sometimes. Would that bother you? I don't know yet. I need more data. She tilted her head, studying him. You look happy, though. Different happy than before. I am happy. Then it's probably okay. But you should tell me when she's staying so I don't get surprised. Surprises in the morning are harder than surprises other times. Deal. I'll always tell you ahead of time. Satisfied, Lena headed to the kitchen to start her elaborate breakfast routine. Daniel stood in the hallway for a moment, marveling at his daughter's capacity to accept change when it was presented honestly, and returned to the bedroom to find Victoria awake. I heard, she said softly. I should have thought about how she'd react. She's fine. Just wants advance warning next time. Next time? Daniel climbed back into bed, pulling Victoria close. I'm hoping there's a next time, many next times. Me too. She kissed him gently. Though I should probably go home and change before Lena decides I'm moving in without proper discussion. Fair point. They had breakfast together, awkward and domestic, and surprisingly comfortable. Lena asked Victoria about her morning routine with the clinical interest of someone conducting research, and Victoria answered each question seriously, understanding that this was Lena's way of integrating new information into her understanding of the world. After Victoria left, promising to return for dinner that evening, Lena cornered Daniel at the sink. Are you going to marry her? She asked with characteristic directness. Daniel nearly dropped the plate he was washing. That's a big question. But are you? I don't know. We've only been together a few months. Marriage is a huge step. But you love her, I can tell. And she loves you, I can tell that too. Lena's expression was matter of fact. So eventually you'll probably get married. I'm just trying to prepare. If that happens, if we ever get to that point, you'd be part of the decision. Your feelings would matter. Good. Because I'd need to make sure she understands that you're a package deal. She doesn't just get you, she gets both of us. I think she knows that, Bug. Maybe. But I'd still want to make it clear. The following months brought a deepening that felt both inevitable and surprising. Victoria's presence in their lives became routine. Her toothbrush in the bathroom, her preferred coffee in the cabinet, her work calls providing background noise to Lena's homework sessions. They celebrated Lena's 10th birthday with an elaborate constellation-themed party that Victoria helped plan, complete with a telescope she'd researched for weeks to find the perfect model. LearnBridge continued expanding, the partnership with Hale Industries proving even more successful than projected. Daniel hired a small team, moved into a real office space, and started fielding acquisition offers from larger education technology companies. Each milestone felt surreal, Like his life had split into before and after that conference in Seattle, and he was still adjusting to living in the after. But success brought complications. Investors pushed for faster growth, demanding features that would broaden market appeal but dilute the core mission of supporting neurodivergent learners. Patricia wanted integration timelines that required Daniel to work weekends and miss family dinners. The pressure to scale sometimes felt at odds with the intimacy that had made LearnBridge special in the first place. Victoria saw him struggling during one particularly brutal week in July, when he'd worked until midnight 3 nights running and snapped at Lena over something trivial. "We need to talk," she said Friday evening, after Lena had gone to bed still hurt from Daniel's earlier irritation. "I know, I was an ass to her. I'll apologize tomorrow." "This isn't about one bad moment. This is about you burning out trying to meet everyone else's expectations while ignoring your own limits." Victoria sat beside him on the couch, her expression serious. "Daniel, you built LearnBridge because you wanted to create something that honored different ways of learning, but you're running it like you have to prove you deserve success by working harder than anyone else. That's not sustainable." "I don't have a choice. The timelines are aggressive. Investors want results. We've got obligations." "So renegotiate the timelines. Tell investors that quality matters more than speed. Set boundaries that protect what you built this for in the first place." She took his hand. "You're allowed to say no, to delegate, to admit that maybe some opportunities aren't worth the cost. What if saying no means losing momentum? What if setting boundaries means investors lose faith and everything collapses? Then it collapses, and you rebuild something more sustainable. But I don't think that's what happens. I think you set boundaries, and people respect them, and the work gets better because you're not half dead from exhaustion." Daniel wanted to argue, but he was too tired and she was too right. He'd been operating from scarcity mindset, afraid that if he didn't grab every opportunity immediately, they'd disappear and never return. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "How to trust that success won't evaporate if I'm not constantly chasing it." "You learn, the same way you learned everything else, by trying, failing, adjusting, trying again." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "And you let people help you instead of carrying everything alone." The next morning, Daniel apologized to Lena properly, explaining that work stress wasn't an excuse for taking frustration out on her. "I know you're busy," Lena said, accepting his apology with the gravity of someone who understood the weight of words. "But I miss you when you're here, but not really here. Like your body is present, but your brain is still at work." "You're absolutely right. I'm going to do better about that." "Good, because Victoria's good at being present even when she's busy. You should learn from her." Daniel laughed despite himself. "When did you become my life coach?" "I've always been your life coach. You just started listening." That week, Daniel made changes. He pushed back on Patricia's timeline, explaining that rushing integration would compromise quality. He told investors that sustainable growth mattered more than explosive scaling, that he'd rather build something lasting than something flashy that burned out fast. He delegated more to Marcus and the team, trusting them to handle problems he'd been micromanaging. Some investors grumbled. Patricia pushed back initially, then acknowledged that he had a point. The team thrived with more autonomy, solving problems Daniel hadn't even realized needed solving. And slowly, Daniel's shoulders started to relax again. August brought an unexpected crisis that tested everything they'd built. Daniel's laptop crashed during a critical presentation to potential school district partners, taking with it 3 months of customization data that hadn't been backed up to the cloud. The recovery process revealed security vulnerabilities in their data architecture that required immediate attention and significant resources to fix. Daniel spent 72 hours in crisis mode, working with their development team to patch vulnerabilities, restore data, and rebuild trust with partners who'd witnessed the failure. He barely slept, survived on coffee and anxiety, and watched LearnBridge's reputation hang in the balance. Victoria appeared at his office on the 3rd day, carrying real food and an expression that suggested she wasn't taking no for an answer. "Eat," she commanded, setting down containers from his favorite Thai place. "I can't. We've got the security audit in an hour. The district partners want assurances we can't provide yet, and I still haven't figured out how to restore the customization profiles without—" "Daniel, eat. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." He wanted to argue, but his hands were shaking from too much caffeine and too little food. He ate mechanically while Victoria watched, then set down his fork with a confession he'd been avoiding. I'm terrified this is it, that this failure proves I was never qualified to run a company, that I got lucky with the partnership but don't actually have what it takes to sustain success. Victoria pulled up a chair beside him. You know what I did when Hale Industries had our first major security breach? What? Locked myself in my office and cried for an hour, then called my board and admitted we'd made critical mistakes in our security architecture, then worked for 96 hours straight to fix it while our stock price dropped 20%. She met his eyes. Companies fail sometimes, products break, security vulnerabilities happen. What matters is how you respond, with transparency, urgency, and commitment to doing better. What if the district partners walk away? What if this destroys our reputation before we've really built one? Then you rebuild. But Daniel, you're doing everything right, acknowledging the problem, fixing it comprehensively, communicating honestly with partners. That's what builds trust, not pretending failures don't happen. The security audit that afternoon was brutal but productive. The district partners were frustrated but appreciated Daniel's honesty about what had failed and what they were doing to prevent future breaches. By the end of the week, they'd restored data, implemented new security protocols, and begun rebuilding the customization profiles with better backup systems. And through it all, Victoria was there, not fixing his problems, but standing beside him while he fixed them himself. She brought food when he forgot to eat, fielded calls when he was underwater, and reminded him that one failure didn't negate everything he'd built. Lena noticed the strain, though. She'd been unusually quiet all week, her normal routines disrupted by Daniel's crisis hours and Victoria's constant presence. Saturday morning, when things had finally stabilized, Lena asked to talk. Are you okay, Bug? Daniel asked, sensing something beneath her careful composure. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Always. Is Victoria going to leave when things get hard, like Mom did? The question landed like a punch. Daniel had known this fear existed, but hearing Lena voice it made it real and urgent. What makes you think that? This week was hard. Really hard. And she stayed. But Mom left when I was hard. When things got complicated with my diagnosis, so I need to know if Victoria's staying because things are easy right now, or if she's staying even when they're not. Daniel pulled Lena close, feeling the weight of her question. I can't promise you what another person will do, but I can tell you what I've seen. Victoria showed up this week when things were terrible. She didn't fix my problems or make them go away, but she stayed and helped me through them. That's not what someone does if they're only interested in easy. But how do you know she won't change her mind? How do you know she won't decide we're too much work? I don't know for certain. Love always carries that risk, that the other person might leave. But Lena, your mom leaving wasn't about you being too much work. It was about her not being ready to be the parent you needed. That was her failure, not yours. It still felt like my fault. I know, baby, and I'm sorry you've carried that. But Victoria isn't your mom. She's someone who shows up, who keeps her promises, who's proven over months that she's committed to both of us. Can I ask her about whether she's staying? If you need to, yes. She'll understand. That afternoon, while Daniel was food shopping, Lena cornered Victoria in the living room where she was working on her laptop. I need to ask you something important, Lena announced with the seriousness of someone preparing for difficult conversation. Victoria closed her laptop, giving Lena her full attention. Okay, ask me anything. Are you going to leave when things get hard, or when I'm too complicated, or when you decide that being with my dad isn't worth dealing with me? Victoria's expression shifted. Surprise, then understanding, then something that looked like pain. Lena, come sit with me. Lena climbed onto the couch beside her, maintaining careful distance. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'll never leave, Victoria said quietly. People can't promise forever because we don't control the future. But I can promise that I'm committed to trying, that I'm here because I want to be, and that you being part of your dad's life isn't something I'm tolerating, it's something I value. But my mom left. She said I was too hard. Your mom made a choice based on her own limitations. That wasn't about you being too hard, it was about her not being equipped to be the parent you deserved. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. Lena, you're not too much. You're not too complicated. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be in your life. Do you see that? I see someone brilliant and creative and brave enough to ask hard questions instead of pretending everything's fine. I see someone who's taught me more about honesty and presence than any business book ever could. Victoria paused. I see someone I'd be honored to keep knowing, if you'll let me. Lena was quiet, processing. What if you and my dad break up? Then I'd be sad, and I'd miss both of you. But I'd try to handle it in a way that didn't hurt you more than necessary. I'd communicate honestly, I wouldn't disappear without explanation, and I'd respect whatever boundaries you and your dad needed. You promise? I promise. I can't promise we'll never break up, but I can promise I won't be cruel or cowardly about it. Lena studied Victoria's face with that intense assessment she brought to important decisions. Finally, she leaned against Victoria's shoulder, a gesture of trust that made Victoria's breath catch. Okay, Lena said. You can stay. Thank you. That means a lot to me. When Daniel returned from shopping, he found them sitting together on the couch, Victoria reading aloud from Lena's fantasy novel, while Lena critiqued the narrator's interpretation of character motivations. Something in his chest expanded at the sight. These two people he loved, building their own relationship independent of his connection to either of them. That night, after Lena was asleep, Victoria told him about the conversation. She needed to know I wasn't going anywhere when things got hard, Victoria said. I can't believe her mother made her think she was the problem. People protect themselves in destructive ways sometimes. Amber couldn't handle the reality that parenting Lena required flexibility and patience she didn't have, so she convinced herself the problem was Lena's diagnosis rather than her own limitations. That's heartbreaking. It is. But we're building something different now, a family that shows up, that stays, that does the hard work of actually being present. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Is that what we are? A family? Daniel felt his heart rate accelerate. They'd been dancing around this definition for months, but neither had named it explicitly. I think we are, he said carefully. Or we're becoming one, if that's what you want. It's what I want. It terrifies me, but it's what I want. Why does it terrify you? Because I've never had this. A partner who sees all of me, a child who trusts me enough to ask hard questions, a life that feels whole instead of compartmentalized. It's everything I didn't know I needed, which makes it feel fragile. It's not fragile, it's real, which means it's resilient. Real things can bend without breaking. Victoria turned to face him fully. I want to do this right, Daniel, not just the relationship part, but the family part. I want Lena to know she can count on me. I want us to build something that lasts. Then we do it together. No performance, no pretending things are easier than they are. Just showing up honestly and doing the work. I can do that. I know you can. You already are. They made love that night with a tenderness that felt like sealing promises neither of them had fully articulated yet. Afterward, lying tangled together in the dark, Daniel found himself thinking about the past year. How a collapsing booth at a conference had somehow led to this, to love and partnership, and the slow construction of a family that defied every plan he'd tried to make. September brought another shift. Victoria's company was acquiring a smaller education technology firm based in Boston, requiring her to spend 2 weeks on the East Coast managing integration. It was the longest separation they'd faced since getting together, and Daniel found himself unprepared for how much he missed her presence. But what surprised him more was how much Lena missed her. When's Victoria coming back? Lena asked for the third time in as many days. Friday, Bug. Same as yesterday when you asked. That's 4 more days. That's a long time. I know. I miss her too. Can we video call her? They called that evening, and Daniel watched Lena's face light up when Victoria answered. Hi, Lena said. I miss you. Daddy misses you too, but he's trying to be stoic about it. Victoria laughed. I miss you both. Boston's boring without you. Are you coming back Friday for sure? For sure. I already have my flight booked. Good. Because I finished the first chapter of my graphic novel, and I want to show you. They talked for 30 minutes, Lena explaining her artistic choices, Victoria asking detailed questions that showed she'd been paying attention to every previous conversation about the project. When they finally hung up, Lena looked at Daniel with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. She remembered about the graphic novel, about what I was working on, about everything I told her before she left. She always remembers. I know. That's how I know she's not pretending to care. She actually does. Friday evening, Daniel and Lena went to the airport to pick up Victoria. They stood at arrivals watching the stream of passengers, and Daniel felt anticipation building in his chest. Not anxiety this time, but genuine excitement at seeing her again. When Victoria emerged through the doors, pulling her carry-on and looking exhausted from 2 weeks of high-pressure negotiations, her face transformed when she saw them. She abandoned her luggage and pulled them both into a hug that felt like coming home. "I missed you," she said into Daniel's shoulder. "We missed you too," Lena said, squeezing tighter. "Don't go away that long again." "I'll try not to." In the car on the way back, Victoria described the acquisition's complexities while Lena chattered about everything that had happened during the 2 weeks. Daniel drove, listening to them talk over each other, and felt something settle that he hadn't realized was unsettled. This was his life now. Not perfect, not simple, but whole in ways he'd stopped believing were possible. That night, after Lena was asleep, Victoria made a confession. "Being away made me realize something," she said. "This isn't my second home anymore. It's just home. My apartment feels empty now, like I'm staying somewhere temporary when I'm there." "Are you saying what I think you're saying? I want to move in, properly. Not just staying over most nights, but actually living here, being part of the family officially." She rushed on before he could respond. "I know the apartment's small and we'd need to figure out logistics, but maybe we could look for a bigger place, somewhere with room for all of us, where Lena has her own space and I'm not just a guest who happens to be here constantly." Daniel felt his heart hammering. "You want to move in together?" "I want to build a life together, officially, intentionally, without holding back parts of ourselves in case it doesn't work." Victoria's eyes were bright with something between hope and fear. "Unless you think it's too soon, in which case we can wait. Daniel kissed her, cutting off the nervous spiral. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Yes, let's do it. Let's find a place together, build an actual home, make this official." "Yeah?" "Yeah. But we tell Lena together, make sure she's part of the decision." "Of course." They told her the next morning over breakfast. Lena listened carefully as they explained the plan, finding a bigger apartment where everyone had their own space, Victoria moving in officially, building a home together as a family. "Does this mean Victoria would be like my other parent?" Lena asked. Victoria and Daniel exchanged glances, navigating the delicate territory. "Not exactly," Victoria said. "Your dad's your parent. I'd be something else. Someone who's committed to being in your life, who helps take care of you, who you can count on. We'd need to figure out together what that relationship looks like. Like family, but not exactly the same as other families?" "Exactly like that. Our own configuration that works for us." Lena considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "I'd want my own room, a big one, with space for my books and my art supplies and my fort-building materials." "Absolutely," Daniel said. "That's non-negotiable." "And Victoria would need an office so she can do her work calls without us being loud in the background." "Also non-negotiable," Victoria agreed. "And we'd need a real kitchen so Daddy can cook properly instead of in that tiny space where everything's always in the way." "We're making a list," Daniel said, pulling out his phone. "Keep going." They spent the morning cataloging requirements, Lena approaching the house hunt with the same systematic thoroughness she brought to everything. By lunch, they had a comprehensive list ranging from practical necessities to Lena's insistence on a balcony for stargazing. The search took 6 weeks, dozens of viewings, and multiple moments where they almost settled for something that was good enough but not quite right. Finally, in late October, they found it, a 3-bedroom apartment in a quieter neighborhood, with a real kitchen and a balcony and enough space that they wouldn't be constantly on top of each other. "This is it," Lena announced the moment they walked in, with the certainty of someone who'd made an irreversible decision. "Don't you want to see the other rooms first?" Daniel asked. "I can tell. This one feels right." She was correct, as usual. The place felt right in ways that transcended practical considerations. Felt like possibility, like beginning, like a space where they could actually build the family they were becoming. They signed the lease that week and spent November moving in, combining two households into one with all the expected chaos and unexpected discoveries. Victoria owned significantly more kitchen equipment than Daniel had realized. Daniel had apparently been hoarding takeout menus like they were historical artifacts. Lena had strong opinions about furniture placement based on feng shui principles she'd learned from YouTube. The first night in the new apartment, they ordered pizza and sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, exhausted and happy. "To new beginnings," Victoria said, raising her soda can. "To family," Daniel added. "To having my own room finally," Lena chimed in, making them all laugh. December brought an unexpected call from Daniel's former colleague, offering him a job opportunity that would have been his dream 5 years ago. Director of Innovation at a prestigious tech company, significant salary, excellent benefits, stability, and prestige. He turned it down without much hesitation. "You didn't even think about it?" Victoria asked when he told her. "I thought about it for approximately 30 seconds. Then I remembered why I built LearnBridge in the first place. Not to climb someone else's ladder, but to create something meaningful that couldn't exist within traditional structures." Daniel smiled. "Besides, I have everything I need right here. Why would I trade that for a fancier title? Most people would jump at that opportunity. I'm not most people. I'm someone who learned the hard way that presence matters more than prestige." Victoria kissed him then, fierce and proud. "I love you. I love you too." The holidays that year felt different from any Daniel had experienced. For the first time since his parents died, he had a partner to share the season with, someone who stayed up late helping Lena make elaborate decorations, and who insisted on cooking a proper Christmas dinner despite her admitted lack of culinary skill. Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts in their pajamas, Lena orchestrating the order of opening with the precision of an event planner. When it was Victoria's turn, she handed Daniel an envelope with shaking hands. "This isn't the real gift," she said nervously. "The real gift wouldn't fit under the tree." Daniel opened the envelope to find a document, legal papers establishing a trust fund for Lena's education, enough to cover college and graduate school regardless of what Daniel's business fortunes looked like. "Victoria," he breathed, overwhelmed, "this is too much." "It's not. It's what family does. We take care of each other's futures." She looked at Lena. "Your dad built LearnBridge so you'd have opportunities. I want to make sure those opportunities are protected regardless of what happens with the company." "What if we break up?" Daniel asked quietly. "The trust is irrevocable. It's Lena's, regardless of our relationship status." Victoria's voice was steady. "This isn't contingent on us staying together. It's about making sure she has what she needs." Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you. This is incredibly generous." "It's what you do for family," Victoria repeated. Lena, who'd been watching the exchange with careful attention, climbed into Victoria's lap and hugged her tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying, for being here, for being family." Victoria's eyes were wet when she pulled back. "Thank you for letting me." The new year arrived with a sense of stability Daniel had never quite achieved before. LearnBridge was thriving, the partnership with Hale Industries expanding into international markets. Daniel's team was strong and capable, handling day-to-day operations while he focused on strategic direction and product development. For the first time in years, he wasn't operating from scarcity or fear. But more than professional success, he had something he'd stopped believing in after Amber left. A real partnership with someone who showed up consistently, who shared burdens and celebrated victories, who loved both him and his daughter with equal commitment. In February, on the anniversary of the conference where they'd met, Victoria planned a surprise. She told Daniel to block out Saturday afternoon, that she had something to show him. Marie took Lena for the day, and Victoria drove Daniel to the airport. "We're not flying somewhere, are we?" Daniel asked, confused. "Not exactly. Come on." She led him through the terminal to gate 47, the same gate where he'd almost boarded a flight home a year ago. The same gate where Victoria had stopped him with 4 words that changed everything. "I wanted to bring you here," Victoria said, "because this is where it started. This is where I almost let you leave, where you almost got on that plane, where we almost missed each other entirely." Daniel felt his chest tighten with memory. "I remember. I was standing right here, boarding pass in hand, thinking about getting home to Lena. And I ran after you, breathless and terrified and completely certain that I couldn't let you leave without at least trying. Victoria took both his hands. Daniel, this year with you and Lena has been the best year of my life. You've taught me what it means to be present, to prioritize what matters, to build something real instead of just successful. Victoria, let me finish. I brought you here because I want to make a promise at the place where we started. I promise to keep showing up, to keep choosing presence over performance, to keep building this family we're creating together. She pulled a small box from her pocket, and Daniel's heart stopped. I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet, not until we're both ready. But I am asking you to keep building this life with me, to keep taking chances on what we're creating, to keep believing that sometimes the best future starts when you choose not to leave. Inside the box was a key, simple, symbolic, perfect. What's this? A key to my apartment, the one I haven't sold yet because I'm terrified of completely letting go of my escape route. Victoria's smile was rueful. I want to give it to you, to make official what's already true, that my home is wherever you and Lena are, and I don't need a backup plan anymore. Daniel took the key, feeling the weight of what it represented. I love you, and I'm terrified too, but I'm choosing to trust this anyway. That's all we can do. Choose trust over fear, presence over protection. He kissed her there at gate 47, in the place where their story began, surrounded by strangers rushing to their own destinations. When they pulled apart, Victoria was crying and smiling simultaneously. I have something for you too, Daniel said. Not as poetic as this, but meaningful. He pulled out his phone and showed her a document he'd been working on with his lawyer, papers to establish Victoria as Lena's legal guardian in case anything happened to him, formalizing her role in their family. I know we're not married, and I know this is unconventional, he said, but your family, Victoria. You're the person I trust with my daughter's future, and I wanted to make that official. Victoria read the document through tears, then pulled him close. I don't know what to say. Say you'll sign it. Say you're committed to this family we're building, in whatever form it takes. I'm committed, completely. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while travelers streamed past, and Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a collapsing conference booth to partnership contracts, to this moment of choosing each other repeatedly, consciously, despite fear. That evening, they picked up Lena from Marie's and went home to the apartment that was truly theirs now. Over dinner, they told Lena about the guardianship papers and what they meant. So if something happens to Daddy, I'd stay with you? Lena asked Victoria. If something happened to your dad, you'd stay with me. But we're hoping nothing happens to anyone for a very long time. Lena processed this with her usual thoughtfulness. That makes sense. You're already basically my parent anyway. We should just make it official. That's the idea, Daniel said. Good. I like official things. They're clearer than unofficial things. Spring brought another milestone. LearnBridge won a national award for innovation in education technology, recognition that came with significant media attention and validation from the industry. At the ceremony, Daniel stood on stage accepting the award and thought about Lena watching from the audience beside Victoria, about how none of this would have happened without the love that drove him to build something better. In his acceptance speech, he didn't talk about the technology or the business metrics. Instead, he talked about his daughter, about building systems that honored different kinds of brilliance, about the responsibility to create tools that served people rather than forcing people to serve tools. I built LearnBridge because my daughter deserved better than systems designed to measure her against arbitrary standards, he said. And what I learned is that she's not the one who needed fixing. The systems were. Every student who's thrived using this platform is proof that when we stop asking people to change themselves and start changing our approaches, everyone benefits. The audience applauded, but Daniel was looking at Lena, watching her face glow with pride, and knew that this moment mattered less than all the small moments that had led here. The homework sessions, the late-night conversations, the choice to trust that different didn't mean deficient. After the ceremony, reporters wanted interviews, industry leaders wanted meetings, investors wanted follow-up conversations. Daniel navigated it all with Victoria's hand in his, grounding him, reminding him why any of this mattered. That night, Back at the apartment with Lena asleep and the award sitting on their kitchen counter, Victoria asked the question that had been building for months. Will you marry me? Daniel looked up from his laptop, certain he'd misheard. What? Will you marry me? Victoria repeated, her voice steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. I know I said I wasn't asking yet, but I am now. I want to make this official in every way that matters. I want to be your wife, Lena's legal parent, your partner in everything. I want to stop pretending this might be temporary and just commit to the permanence we're already living. Daniel felt his heart racing. You're serious? Completely serious. I love you, I love Lena, I love the life we've built. I want all of it, officially and permanently. Yes, Daniel said, the word coming out more certain than anything he'd ever said. Yes, I'll marry you. I want all of it too. Victoria crossed the room and kissed him, and Daniel tasted salt and realized she was crying again. We should tell Lena, she said when they finally pulled apart. Tomorrow. Let's tell her together tomorrow. They did, over breakfast, presenting it as a family decision rather than something already decided. How would you feel if Victoria and I got married? Daniel asked. Lena looked between them, her expression thoughtful. Would that make Victoria officially my parent? We could do a step-parent adoption if you wanted, Victoria said. So legally, I'd be your parent, not just your dad's wife. What would I call you? Whatever you're comfortable with. Some kids call step-parents by their first name, some use mom or a variation. It's your choice. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Can I think about it? Of course, Daniel said. Take all the time you need. She thought about it for 3 days, approaching the decision with her characteristic thoroughness. She made lists, asked detailed questions about what would change and what would stay the same, consulted Marie about step-family dynamics. Finally, on Thursday evening, she announced her decision. I want you to get married, she told them, and I want to do the adoption thing. But I want to call you Victoria still, not Mom. Mom is for the person who stayed and you stayed, so you get to keep your name. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. That's perfect. Whatever you're comfortable with is what we'll do. Good. Can I be in the wedding? Absolutely. You're the most important person there. They planned a small ceremony for late summer, just family and close friends. Nothing elaborate or performative. Marie helped with logistics. Marcus offered to handle the technical aspects of live streaming for colleagues who couldn't attend. And Lena took charge of decoration planning with the intensity of a professional event coordinator. The wedding itself was simple and perfect. They held it in a botanical garden surrounded by flowers and green growing things, with Lena standing between them as they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. I promise to keep showing up, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. To choose presence over perfection, to build a life that honors who we all actually are instead of who we're supposed to be. I promise to love you through success and failure, through easy times and hard, and to keep choosing this family every single day. I promise to keep learning, Victoria said, to keep letting you teach me about presence and patience and what it means to prioritize what matters most. I promise to love you and Lena with everything I have, to show up even when it's hard, to keep building this beautiful, complicated family we've created together. When they kissed, Lena cheered loudly enough to startle the officiant, and everyone laughed through their tears. At the reception, Daniel watched Victoria dance with Lena to a song Lena had chosen, watched them laugh together, and felt something he'd stopped believing in after losing his parents, the certainty that family wasn't just biology or legal documents, but the choice to keep showing up for each other. Marie found him standing alone, watching them. You did good, she said, squeezing his shoulder. Built something real. We all did. None of this happens without you showing up when we needed you. That's what family does. Later, when the sun was setting and guests were filtering out, Daniel found himself standing with Victoria and Lena on the garden's observation deck, looking out at the city where everything had started. What are you thinking? Victoria asked, slipping her hand into his. I'm thinking about 1.5 years ago, standing at an airport gate, almost getting on a plane because I thought going home was the only responsible choice. And now? Now I know that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to stay. He pulled them both closer. It's you. It's Lena. It's this family we built from courage and love and the willingness to trust something that felt impossible. We should go back there sometime, Victoria said, to Gate 47. Make it an anniversary tradition. I'd like that. Lena looked up at both of them, her face serious. Promise we'll keep doing this? Keep being a family even when it's hard? We promise, they said together. Good, because I like this. I like us. Me too, Bug. Me too. They stood there as the sun set over Seattle, three people who'd found each other through collapsing booths and missed flights, and the courage to stay instead of running. They'd built something imperfect and real and resilient, a family that honored difference, celebrated presence, and chose love over fear every single day. Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that conference where his booth fell apart to this moment where everything felt perfectly aligned. He thought about the award on their kitchen counter, about LearnBridge reaching thousands of students who'd been written off by traditional systems, about his daughter thriving in ways he'd once been told were impossible. But mostly, he thought about this. Standing with the two people he loved most in the world, watching the city lights come on like stars falling upward, and knowing that the most important journey didn't begin with a destination. It began with the courage to stay, to trust, to believe that sometimes the best future starts when you choose not to leave, when you build bridges instead of walls, when you show up instead of protecting yourself, when you let love be messy and complicated and worth every risk. The airport that changed everything was just a building now, a place they'd visit sometimes to remember where they started. But home was wherever the three of them stood together, choosing each other, building something that lasted because it was built on truth instead of performance. Daniel Brooks, who'd once stood alone holding up a collapsing banner, now stood surrounded by family he'd built from courage and hope. And when Lena squeezed his hand and Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, he knew with complete certainty that he'd made the right choice. He'd stayed. And in staying, he'd found everything.